Welcome, dear traveller. You have arrived, perhaps not by chance, but by a whisper of the wind, a calling in the stillness of your heart. This is the empty boat, a place not of answers, but of presence, not of noise, but of gentle remembering. Here, you are not asked to become anything, only to be, to breathe, to return quietly to the quiet within. In this journey, we will walk through forgotten forests, sit beneath moons that do not speak, and listen to the sound of bells that never rang. We will meet monks who burned with anger, children who carried wisdom, flowers that bloomed and faded without regret. Each story you hear is not just a tale, it is a mirror, a whisper, a seed left in the garden of your soul. Let the world slow down now. Let your shoulders soften. Let the tightness in your chest begin to melt like snow touched by spring sun. There is nothing you need to do, no destination to reach. You are already home. So, close the many tabs in your mind. Loosen your grip. Be here. Let us begin with the sound of the empty boat. Story 1. The sound of the empty bell. In the fading blush of dusk, a young man walked the stone path that led through a forest once known to house monks who spoke only in silence. His feet were sore, his thoughts louder than his breath. He had come from a city of bright lights and even brighter expectations, where noise wrapped around every hour like a second skin. His name was Kenji. He did not know why he walked, only that his chest had grown too heavy to remain still. Something in him had cracked, though not from violence, but from weariness. A longing he could not name, a silence he could no longer avoid. He had heard of an old temple, abandoned by time, hidden deep in the hills beyond any map. They said it held a bell, an enormous bronze bell, cracked down its center, silent for 100 years. And yet, those who sat before it claimed they could still hear it. A bell that no longer rang, but never stopped echoing. Kenji did not believe in such things, but his feet walked anyway. The path narrowed. The air smelled of pine and smoke from wood long turned. To memory, finally, beneath the orange glow of a dying sky, he saw it. A humble gate, eaten at the edges by moss and time, and beyond it, a clearing where a stone platform rested. Upon that platform stood the bell, tall, noble, silent. A breath caught in Kenji's throat. He did not know why. He stepped into the clearing, sat cross-legged before the bell, and closed his eyes. He waited. The forest whispered. The crickets sang. The wind slid over the lip of the cracked bell. And then, nothing. He felt the tightness in his jaw, the flicker of a thought. What now? Was that it? But he said nothing, did nothing. The stars opened their eyes above, and still he sat, and then it came. Not a sound, but a feeling, a gentle hum, as if the silence itself was singing, not with notes, but with memory, as if the bell had no need for striking, it simply was, whole in its brokenness. A tear fell. He did not wipe it away. Once, long ago, in a village where the river kissed the foot of a sacred mountain, there was a young monk named Diane. Diane was diligent, humble, but troubled. While his fellow novices found peace in chanting, in walking, meditation in sweeping the gardens, Diane felt a restlessness he could not name. He confessed to the old abbot, Master Yosui, "I want to hear the truth, Master. I chant, I bow, I breathe. But still, the silence is deafening. I need to hear something real. Yosui smiled. He pointed to the great temple bell at the courtyard's center. Then go, he said, and listen to the bell, but do not strike it. Sit before it. Just listen. Diane was confused, but obeyed. He sat before the great bell at dawn, at noon, at dusk. Days passed. Birds nested above the bell's bronze crown. Rain fell upon its rim. Wind caressed its skin, but no sound came. On the seventh day, Diane cried, "It is silent, Master. Nothing speaks." The abbot placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "The bell has never stopped ringing. You only stopped listening." That night, under moonlight, Diane returned. He did not seek a sound. He simply sat. And as his mind quieted, as thought dissolved into breath, he heard it. Not the bell, but the space around it. Not sound, but presence. And it broke him open like a seed, learning to become tree. You see, the bell in the story is not a bell. It is your breath, your broken heart, your silence. The parts of you thought were too cracked to hold any music. But the truth is, there is a sound deeper than noise, a resonance beyond thought, a presence that speaks only in stillness. The bell was never meant to be struck. It was meant to be witnessed, to sit beside, to feel. And in that presence, we meet something terrifying to the modern mind. Stillness, the echo of our own emptiness. In today's world, we are taught to chase noise, to fill every second, to scroll, to speak, to achieve, to never stop. But underneath that noise, many of us, perhaps even you, carry a deep fatigue, a grief unnamed, an anxiety that no therapist's prescription fully quiets. You feel like you're running without knowing why. You're tired, but cannot sleep. You breathe, but do not rest. This is the modern bell. We do not sit with it. We try to strike it. We want quick answers, instant peace, fast enlightenment. But healing, like the cracked bell, asks for reverence. It asks for time. It asks us to be still long enough to remember what we forgot beneath the surface. Silence is not emptiness. It is full of forgotten parts of you. Your pain, your joy, your buried child, your longing to be seen, your wish to belong. If you are listening to this now, perhaps something in you, like Kenji, has walked far enough. Perhaps you too are weary, and so I offer you this. Sit before your own bell. Close your eyes, not to escape, but to arrive. Do not ask for answers. Just listen. Breathe in. Feel the cool air enter your body. Breathe out. Release the need to fix, to solve, to control. The bell does not need to ring. Its presence is the sound, and so is yours. You are not broken. You are sounding, even in your silence. Before we close this story, let me offer you 3 things. A whisper of the Buddha. Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Dhammapada, a reflection for your evening. What if silence isn't something you endure, but a doorway you forgot how to enter? A gentle meditation. Tonight, before you sleep, sit upright. Hands soft, eyes lowered. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Exhale for 6. Listen, not to a voice, not to a thought, but to the space between. The bell is ringing, always has. This was the first step in our journey. In the next story, we'll walk with a river that forgets its name. But tonight, let the echo of this bell carry you into sleep, into breath, into presence. If this story has touched you, leave a comment with what you heard, not with your ears, but your heart. Like, share, and follow the empty boat so we can keep walking together toward stillness, toward healing, toward home. Story 2. Where the river forgets its name. The next morning, Kenji awoke in the temple clearing where he had sat with the silent bell. His body was stiff, but his breath had softened. Something inside had shifted. No revelation, no thunder, just space. Room, perhaps, for a question he had never dared to ask. What happens when I stop trying to become someone? He walked to the edge of the hill, where the mist clung to the trees like forgotten thoughts. Below, a narrow stream shimmered under the light of a rising sun. It beckoned, gently, without words. He followed it. The stream wound through the forest, like a silver ribbon, always moving, but never in haste. At times it disappeared beneath thick roots, only to reappear further ahead, laughing quietly to itself. Kenji walked beside it, not with purpose, but with presence. By midday, he came upon a stranger, an old man sitting barefoot on a rock in the middle of the river, legs folded, eyes closed, hands resting like falling leaves. Kenji stopped, uncertain whether to speak. But before he could open his mouth, the man said, "You've come far to find what never left." Kenji blinked. "How did you—" The man smiled. "The river told me." Kenji stepped closer. "What is this place?" The man opened his eyes, clear, calm, endless like deep water. "This," he said, "is the river that forgot its name. Once, in a time before time, there was a mighty river known across kingdoms for its beauty and strength. It sang with clarity, fed villages, carried boats, and was honored by all. The river was proud. It carved its name into the earth with every curve. But one day, a drought came, not of rain, but of meaning. The world around it changed. People no longer listened. Machines roared over its banks. Trash floated where prayers once were. The river wept. And in its sorrow, it forgot its name. It no longer flowed with power. It meandered. It whispered. It disappeared behind stones and reappeared unsure of itself. The trees leaned in, asking, "Who are you now?" And the river replied, "I don't know, don't." Years passed. One day, a cloud drifted low and rained into the river with kindness. It said nothing, just offered itself. And the river, touched without question, laughed for the first time in years. From that day on, the river flowed again. Not to be known, not to be praised, but simply to be. It had no name, and it needed none. "Is that a real story?" Kenji asked. The old man shrugged. "Is your pain real? Or just your thoughts about it?" Kenji looked down at the water. Why did the river forget its name? Because its name was never who it was. It was only a sound others gave it. Kenji sat beside him on a nearby stone, his feet brushing the water's edge. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said quietly. The old man nodded. "Good." Kenji frowned. "Good?" To forget your name is not to lose yourself. It is to lose the story that was never yours to carry. In the psychology of today, we often cling to identity like a raft in stormy seas. We say, "I am anxious. I am not enough. I am a success. I am a failure." We name ourselves in relation to pain, status, achievement, appearance. We define, we confine. But identity, like the river's name, is only a placeholder. It is not the essence. It is the label on the bottle, not the water inside. When we suffer, it is often because we forget we are the water, and instead, we defend the label. I have to be strong. I must not fail. I am the smart one. I cannot cry. And so we dam the river, we shape it, control it, until it forgets how to flow. Kenji dipped his fingers into the water. It was cool, forgiving. So what do I do if I'm not who I thought I was? Be the river, the old man said. Just flow, just flow. Let yourself forget. Let yourself feel. Let yourself not know. But how do I know where I'm going? You don't. Kenji looked at him, half terrified, half awestruck. And that's okay? The man smiled again. Have you ever seen a river worry about where it ends? Kenji laughed softly. It felt like something inside him exhaled. This story is not about a real river. It is about you. About the part of you that is tired of holding on to who you think you have to be. You may have worn labels all your life. The good child, the broken one, the one who never cries, the one who must always know the way. But beneath those labels is movement, life, flow, a presence that is unnamed, because it is too vast to name. When we drop identity, even for a moment, we touch something holy, something beyond the ego's mirror. That space is healing, because it allows you to breathe without pretending, to sit without defending, to cry without judgment, to laugh without reason. Like a river, just here. If you are listening to this now, you are already in the river. You may not know where it's going. You may be afraid of forgetting who you were. But I promise you, what flows is not lost. What forgets itself remembers something deeper. You are not your job, not your trauma, not your failures, not your successes. You are the one who sees, the one who feels, the one who keeps moving. Let yourself forget. And in that forgetting, you may just remember the vast, open silence of who you truly are. Before we close, receive these final reflections like stones in your palm, a verse from the Buddha's breath. Just as a river flows to the ocean without clinging to its banks, so too should one let go of all attachments. Anguttara Nikaya, a soul question for the night. What part of you is ready to forget its name and return to flow? A short meditation for sleep or stillness. Lie down or sit gently. Place one hand on your heart, the other on your belly. Inhale like a rising tide. Exhale like a river releasing its weight. Repeat. I do not need to know who I am. I only need to feel that I am. This was the second passage on our journey. In the next story, we will sip from a cup of tea that was never poured. Until then, stay soft. Let go of your name. Let go of your shore, and simply flow. If this river touched something in you, leave a note below. Like, share, and stay with us at the Empty Botus. We drift gently toward the silence that sings. Story 3. The tea that was never poured. Kenji found himself seated on a wooden porch as evening tiptoed across the mountains. The old man from the river had led him through a hidden path, up a quiet hill, to a forgotten tea house carved into the slope like a secret kept by the earth. It was not a place one stumbled upon. It was a place that waited to be remembered. No signs, no names, just a weathered gate, and behind it, a garden that seemed to breathe. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air. Wind stirred the wind chimes into whispers. There was no electricity, no buzzing, only the sound of now. The man, whom Kenji still didn't know by name, had disappeared into the kitchen. The door creaked open moments later. He stepped out carrying a bamboo tray, 2 cups, a teapot. He sat across from Kenji and placed the cups on the wooden floor between them, one before himself, one before Kenji. He did not pour. Instead, he folded his hands into his lap and looked at the young man with eyes that were not asking but listening. Kenji stared at the untouched teacup. He waited. The silence stretched, not in awkwardness, but in depth. Finally he said, "Aren't you going to pour the tea?" The man smiled gently. "When you are ready to receive it." Kenji blinked. "I am ready." The man tilted his head. "Are you? Or do you just want to fill the emptiness?" Kenji opened his mouth, then closed it. And in that moment he realized he had no idea what ready really meant. There once lived a proud scholar who had studied every sutra, every commentary, every scroll. He had earned accolades from the emperor himself, taught at prestigious academies, and was considered a master of Buddhist theory. One day, he traveled far to seek an audience with a Zen master known only as Ryushin. "I have read all the scriptures," the scholar proclaimed. "I have debated the nature of emptiness, refuted the schools of logic, and given lectures on dependent origination, but I still feel restless. Teach me, master. Enlighten me." Ryushin nodded and invited the scholar to tea. He brought out 2 cups, began to pour. The scholar spoke on and on as the master poured, listing his accomplishments, his insights, his doubts, his triumphs. Still, the master poured. Tea spilled over the rim, onto the table, down the scholar's robe. "Master," the scholar shouted, "the cup is full." Ryushin set the teapot down and looked at him gently. "Exactly," he said. "You are like this cup, so full of your own knowing, your own importance, your own beliefs, that there is no room for anything new. How can I pour anything into a vessel that is already full?" The scholar fell silent. And for the first time in years, he listened. You see, the cup that holds the tea is you. We spend our lives filling ourselves with opinions, with strategies, with plans, fears, stories, distractions, explanations, judgments. We believe healing means gaining something. More knowledge, more wisdom, more tools, more techniques. But the Zen path is not about gaining, it is about emptying. Until the cup is ready, until the tea can be tasted, until silence can pour into the soul like warm jasmine. Kenji lowered his gaze to the cup before him. He didn't touch it. He saw now how full he had been. Full of assumptions, full of effort, full of roles, even full of his idea of what healing should look like. The man across from him reached for the teapot and, at last, poured. The liquid flowed slowly, without a splash, clear, steaming, fragrant. Kenji watched every drop. He felt the weight of the moment. He lifted the cup with both hands, bowed slightly, and brought it to his lips. He sipped. It was warm. It was bitter. It was perfect. He set it down with reverence. "What is in the tea?" he asked. The man smiled. "Only what you're ready to taste." In the realm of psychology, we often speak of cognitive overload, of minds too full to absorb, too busy to rest. Our prefrontal cortex swirls in loops of planning, doubting, calculating, regretting. We seek mindfulness, yet resist surrender. We want healing, yet fear stillness. The paradox is this: we cannot be poured into while we are holding tight to everything we already think we know. Healing doesn't begin when we add something. It begins when we soften enough to let go. You cannot listen if you are only rehearsing your reply. You cannot feel peace if you are busy managing your image. You cannot receive love if you are armored in shame. The cup must empty. If you are here now, perhaps you've been sipping life in a hurry, spilling it, forgetting to taste, thinking tea is the same as the idea of tea. So pause, breathe, ask yourself, what am I full of today? What stories am I gripping? What am I not allowing myself to feel? Then place your hands gently in your lap. Imagine a cup before you. Empty, clean, waiting. What would it feel like to let something new be poured into you? Not facts, not answers, but presence. Kenji did not ask for another cup. He simply sat. The man beside him sipped his tea, smiling as if the steam itself carried truth. No more questions were needed. In that space, something subtle shifted. Kenji no longer needed to be filled. He simply needed to be present for the pour. And in that moment, his healing began. A whisper of the Buddha. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. Prajnaparamita, Heart Sutra, reflection to carry. What are you so full of that there is no room for peace to enter? A gentle ritual before rest tonight. Sit with a cup of warm tea or water. Hold it. Do not drink right away. Watch the steam rise. Smell the earth. Feel the weight in your hands. Let your mind be the cup. Let your breath be the pour. Inhale, empty. Exhale, receive. Let the tea that was never poured begin now. Soundscape fades. A single drop into a teacup. Wind through shoji screen. Soft breath. You have listened deeply to story 3. In our next passage, we will sit beneath the bamboo grove, where an angry monk learns the sound of his own fire. If this story poured something into your day, leave a ripple in the comments. Like, subscribe, and walk with us at the empty boathouse. We drift deeper into the healing silence. Story 4. The Angry Monk and the Bamboo Grove. The sky had turned silver. Kenji now walked a forest path carved by wind and time. The old man from the tea house had handed him a small scroll before sunrise and simply said, "Follow the bamboo." No more words, no explanation, and so he walked. The earth beneath his sandals was damp, alive. A gentle fog coiled through the trees like incense from the unseen. Soon the bamboo rose all around him, tall, still, whispering without voices. They stood like sentinels, unshaken, even as the wind pushed against them. The path narrowed into a clearing. There, in the center, sat a small wooden zendo, an open-air meditation hall, humble and timeless. Inside, a single monk was sweeping, not chanting, not sitting, not still, sweeping. But there was something violent in the way he moved the broom, like he was trying to erase more than just leaves. Kenji watched as the monk muttered under his breath, struck, the ground harder than needed, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. When their eyes met, the monk stopped abruptly. "Who sent you?" he demanded. Kenji bowed lightly. "The man at the river. He told me to walk here." The monk snorted. "Of course he did." He turned and began sweeping again, harsher this time. Kenji waited, unsure if he should stay or leave. "Are you always this angry?" he asked softly. The broom stopped. The monk turned slowly. His eyes burned, but not with hatred, with pain. I have tried everything, he whispered. Mantras, meditation, walking, fasting, chanting. I've swallowed my fire, starved my rage, buried my past. And still, it burns. He looked at Kenji. So tell me, traveler, what would you do with a fire that won't go out? Kenji had no answer. But the bamboo behind him rustled gently, as if it did. Long ago, in a quiet mountain temple, there lived a monk named Gensho. Gensho had once been a soldier. He had seen war, killed men, burned villages, and buried friends. When the war ended, his body returned, but not his spirit. He entered the monastery to seek peace, and for a while, he found stillness in silence. But then came the triggers. The sound of thunder reminded him of explosions. The clatter of pots reminded him of bones. The laughter of children made his chest ache with guilt. He grew angry at himself for feeling, for remembering, for not being calm like a monk should be. One night, after breaking his mala beads in frustration, he went to the abbot. I am a failure, he said. I cannot rid myself of this anger. The abbot said nothing. He handed Gensho a torch and led him into the bamboo grove. Light the torch, he said. Gensho did. Now, the abbot continued, burn the bamboo. Gensho stared. What? You heard me. Set the grove on fire. But I can't. Why not? Because it's alive, sacred, beautiful. And even if I tried, the green is too wet. It wouldn't burn. The abbot smiled. And so it is with your anger. When the monk in the zendo finished his story, he sat down on the floor, legs folded beneath him. I hated that lesson, he muttered. I wanted a formula, a cure, not a metaphor. Kenji slowly sat beside him. So what happened? He asked. I sat in the bamboo grove for 3 days. I watched the wind pass through it. I watched it bend but never break. I let myself feel the heat but didn't try to destroy it. I just watched. And I learned something. The grove wasn't there to be changed. It was there to witness me. He turned to Kenji, eyes now softer. Anger is not a mistake. It is a messenger. But when we fight it, suppress it, or let it possess us, we lose the message. In modern therapy, we are often taught to manage anger, control it, redirect it, repress it. But in Zen, there is no war to win, only energy to observe. Anger is heat, fire, movement. But fire, left unheld, can burn down your house. Fire, cradled in a lamp, can light your way. When we demonize our anger, we exile a part of ourselves that only ever wanted to be heard. The child whose boundaries were broken, the soul whose dignity was crushed, the heart whose voice was ignored. We say, I must not feel this. But healing begins when we ask, what is this flame asking me to see? The monk reached for his broom again, but this time he moved slowly, mindfully, as if the sweeping itself was no longer punishment, but prayer. Kenji watched the rhythm. Swipe, inhale, pause, exhale, swipe again, not to cleanse but to be. Do you still feel the fire? Kenji asked. The monk nodded. But now, I know how to sit with it. I breathe with it. It dances, sometimes wildly, but it no longer burns the forest. Down. They sat together in silence, the bamboo swaying above them like monks in moving prayer. If you, listening now, carry anger in your chest, please know this. You are not wrong for feeling it. You are not broken for burning. You are not less spiritual for having fire in your blood. The key is not to become cold. The key is to hold the flame like a lantern, to sit in your own grove and let the wind pass through. Do not seek to fix yourself. Instead, ask your anger, what are you guarding? What do you need me to honor? Where did you begin? And then sit, breathe. Witness. You may find, like Gensho, that the fire cannot burn what is rooted in life. A word from the Buddha. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Dhammapada reflection for your journey. What if your anger isn't a curse, but a compass toward the part of you that longs for care? A short healing practice. Close your eyes. Place a hand on your heart. Picture a flame there. Not wild, not raging, just alive. Breathe in. I see you. Breathe out. I will not abandon you. Repeat. You are safe, even with the fire. Soundscape. The sweeping of a broom, a bamboo stalk creaking gently. Wind soft as a whisper. This was the fourth step in our journey. In our next story, we will fall gently with the leaf that knows no, regret, and learn how to release what no longer needs to be held. If this story softens something in you, let us know below. Like, subscribe, and drift onward with the empty boat, where every flame becomes a lamp and every wound a way. Story 5. The falling leaf knows no regret. Kenji awoke to the sound of something delicate, not a voice, not a bell, but the soft fluttering of a leaf landing near his cheek. He sat up in the bamboo zendo, where the monk had let him sleep. Morning had spilled its light across the floor like golden tea. Outside, the forest had changed. The green of summer had begun to surrender to autumn's amber. He stepped barefoot into the clearing. The air was crisp now, thin and precise. The bamboo grove, once a wall of green, had made space for falling colour. Maple leaves drifted like silent messengers from branch to earth, and as Kenji stood, one landed gently on his shoulder. He held it between his fingers. It was fragile, veined, beautiful, and dying. He did not feel sadness, only awe, the kind of reverence one might feel when watching a candle flicker before it fades, a presence so full it made letting go seem holy. And then he saw her, an old woman knelt by a stone path, sweeping fallen leaves into a wooden basket. Her robe was brown, faded at the edges, her hair white like threadbare clouds. She did not look up as he approached. Kenji bowed. She continued sweeping. After a long silence, she said, "Most people think falling is failure, that to drop away is to die, but not the leaf. The leaf knows." He looked down at the leaf in his palm. "What does it know?" he asked. She glanced at him. Her eyes were like river stones, softened by time. That to fall is not to lose. It is to return. Once, in a mountainside temple, a young nun named Aiko could not stop clinging. She clung to her past. Regrets over choices, grief over family she'd left behind. She clung to her robe, ironing it daily, fussing over the slightest wrinkle. She clung to praise, feeling pride when the master complimented her chanting. She clung to silence, growing anxious if the birds chirped too loudly during meditation. Everything felt like it could be lost, and so she tightened her grip. One day, during sweeping duty, the master approached. He held out a leaf. "Take this," he said. She did. "Now drop it." She hesitated, confused, but obeyed. The leaf floated gently to the ground. "What happened?" he asked. "I let go." "No," he said. "The leaf let you go. You simply stopped holding it." Aiko blinked. "I don't understand." "You don't need to understand," he said, "only to practice. Every day, pick up a leaf, and every day, let it leave you." And so she did. At first, it was just ritual. Then it became metaphor. Then, slowly, truth. She learned to let her past fall. Her perfectionism, her need to control, her fear of change. Each leaf taught her something the mind could not. That peace isn't something you hold. It's what you feel the moment you stop grasping. Kenji sat with the old woman under the maple tree. Leaves drifted like snow around them, yet neither moved to catch them. He asked, "What if I'm afraid to fall?" She chuckled. "Then you are human." He swallowed. "But what if I let go and lose everything? What if there's nothing beneath me?" She paused her sweeping and looked at him. "Child, the leaf does not ask where it will land. It trusts the wind. It does not resist gravity. It dances with it." Kenji closed his eyes. For a moment he imagined himself as a leaf, not broken, not cast away, but returning. He whispered, "How do I know when it's time to let go?" She smiled. "When holding on hurts more than falling, in the landscape of the modern psyche, we cling to many things. Old loves, old roles, old pain, the illusion of certainty, the fantasy of control, the identity we've built over years of trying to be enough. But what we often miss is that grasping is exhausting, and the cost of holding on can be greater than the fear of letting go. Letting go does not mean you forget. It does not mean you give up. It means you choose peace over tension, softness over resistance, trust over fear. We are taught to chase, achieve, acquire, but rarely are we taught how to release. And yet every breath, every season, every heartbeat is a masterclass in impermanence. What if you practiced falling gently? Kenji remained still as a leaf landed on his lap. He did not pick it up. He watched it settle, then watched the wind lift it away. And in that moment he understood. The leaf was never his to keep, and neither was the story he carried, or the pain, or the name he once wore like armor. He placed both hands on the earth. "I'm ready," he whispered, not to rise, but to soften, to let go of needing to know where the wind would take him. If you're here, listening now, perhaps there is something in your life you are still holding tightly. A relationship, a memory, a version of yourself you thought you had to be, and maybe, like the young nun Aiko, you've tried to control what was never yours to control. So here is your invitation. Not to forget, not to give up, but to trust the fall. Letting go is not a collapse, it is a returning. To center, to truth, to the part of you untouched by clinging. Like a leaf, let yourself be carried. The ground has always been waiting. A verse from the Buddha. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Dhammapada 277a, soul question for tonight. What have you been holding that is now asking to be released? Not out of rejection, but out of love. A meditative release practice. Before bed, hold a small object. A stone, a leaf, a coin. Place it in your palm. Name what it represents. a thought, a person, a fear. Then slowly, with full breath, open your palm. Let it rest. Let it go. Let the space that remains be your teacher. Soundscape, gentle wind, leaves falling, the hush of an autumn forest preparing for winter. You have heard the fifth echo in our journey. Next, we will enter the garden of not knowing, where confusion is not a curse, but a gate. If this story met you where you needed it, leave your whisper in the comments. Subscribe, stay, and drift onward with the empty boat, where every falling leaf becomes a way home. Story 6. In the Garden of Not Knowing. The rain had come gently, not the kind that startles or drenches, but the kind that seems to soften everything it touches. Kenji stood at the edge of a moss-laden gate, carved with symbols he couldn't read. The old woman from the maple grove had said nothing after their time beneath the tree, only handed him a key carved from driftwood and whispered, "Take this to the garden that does not answer." And now, here he was. A gate with no lock, a garden with no name, and a mist that kissed his cheeks like memories not yet formed. He stepped inside. The path twisted like thought. No direction, no end. Wild herbs grew beside mossy stones. The trees leaned in as if listening for something beyond the world of words. There were no signs, no statues, no instructions, only a single wooden bench at the garden's center. Kenji sat. The drizzle continued. A silence deeper than quiet wrapped itself around him, and for the first time in days, maybe years, maybe ever, he didn't try to understand it. Once, in the mountains of old Kyoto, there lived a monk named Tetsuya. He had spent decades in study, sutras, commentaries, doctrines, philosophical debates. He could recite the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit, Chinese, and Japanese. He could explain the 12 links of dependent origination like a mathematician diagramming equations. He was, in every way, a master of knowing, but he could not sleep. Every night, the same ache. What if I'm wrong? What if I do not know enough? What if my knowledge is hollow? So he left. He walked for weeks, refusing rides, shelter, or praise. He stopped asking questions. He stopped carrying books. He stopped explaining. And one evening, beneath a tree in a nameless forest, he collapsed. Not from exhaustion, but surrender. "I do not know," he whispered. And in that moment, he found something he had never touched before: peace. The next morning, he wrote a single haiku. "I left knowing's path. Now the wind bows to silence, and the moon forgets." He never returned to teaching. Instead, he became the gardener of a forgotten temple, where those weary of answers came not to learn, but to forget. Kenji leaned back on the bench. A snail crept along the armrest beside him. Rain pooled gently in the hollow of his sandal. He thought of all the things he had tried to be: successful, wise, stable, healed. He thought of all the questions he had brought into the forest. What is wrong with me? How do I become whole? How do I fix this ache? But the garden answered none of them. It simply held him. The longer he sat, the more he realized, maybe healing doesn't come from knowing. Maybe it comes from not knowing and being okay with that. In the modern mind, uncertainty is treated like a virus. We are told to eliminate doubt, to chart 5-year plans, to define goals, to always have clarity. But clarity does not always mean control, and confusion is not always a failure of intelligence. Sometimes not knowing is the most honest place to stand, because in not knowing, we open, we soften, we allow life to be bigger than our answers. Every tree you see does not know where its branches will bend. Every river does not know the shape of the land it will carve. And every soul, especially yours, needs space to wonder, to wander, to not know, and to live anyway. Kenji breathed deeply. No mantra, no goal, just breath. He noticed how the garden seemed to breathe with him, how even the smallest flower moved with the wind, unresisting. He looked up at the cloudy sky and whispered, "I don't know what happens next." And for the first time, that didn't feel like failure. It felt like truth. If you're listening to this, perhaps you too carry questions that ache. Maybe you've asked, when will I heal? Who am I supposed to become? What's my purpose? Maybe you've been told to find clarity, to push harder, to figure it out. But let me offer you this. You don't have to know. You only have to be. Let yourself sit in the garden of not knowing. Let yourself rest in the space where the mind quiets and the heart begins to hum. You don't need to name your pain before it softens. You don't need to define your path before you walk it. You are allowed to say, "I don't know," and still be whole. A verse from the Buddha: "Do not seek for the truth, only cease to cherish opinions." Sengchan, Third Zen, Patriarch. A gentle question for reflection. What question have you been clinging to that might be softened, not by an answer, but by your presence? A night practice of surrender. Sit with your palms open. Say aloud, gently, "I do not know, and that is okay." Breathe. Imagine your thoughts settling like dust in morning light. Let go of the demand for clarity. Feel what remains. In that space, you are not lost. You are simply alive. Soundscape. Rain softens. A frog croaks gently. Wind flows through cedar branches. This was the 6th step of our journey. In our next passage, we'll meet the fox at the temple gate and listen to the old teachings of karma through fur and shadow. If this story gave you room to breathe, leave your unknowing in the comments. Subscribe and stay close to the empty boat, where mystery is not a problem, but a place to begin again. Story 7. The Fox at the Temple Gate. Twilight had painted the world in shades of ash and rose. Kenji's path now curled higher into the hills, where the trees grew sparse and the wind bit a little sharper. He had not been told where to go next, only that the way would find him, and it did. At the edge of a forest ridge, he came upon a stone staircase, half cracked by time, leading to a crumbling temple. Its roof sagged under moss. Vines wrapped the prayer columns like old secrets. At the foot of the stairs, 2 statues of foxes sat in eternal vigil, one with its mouth open, the other sealed shut. Kenji felt it before he heard it. A presence. Not threatening, but watchful. From behind a lantern post, a fox emerged, red fur glowing in the last blush of sunlight. It did not run. It did not blink. It simply stared, as if it had been waiting. Kenji stood still. The fox circled him once, then trotted up the stairs. At the temple threshold, it turned to look back, and Kenji understood. He followed. The temple interior was half in ruin, half in reverence. Wooden prayer tablets still hung from rusted nails. A single lotus candle burned at the center altar, and, beside it, seated in meditation, was a man with hair like snowfall and robes stained with age. The fox curled beside him like a disciple. Kenji bowed. The man opened his eyes. "Why do you follow shadows?" the man asked. Kenji hesitated. I don't know. The fox led me." The old man smiled gently. "Foxes do not lead, they reflect. What you saw was not its path. It was yours." Kenji stepped forward. "Who are you?" The man nodded toward the fox. "Once, I was him." Kenji blinked. "I don't understand." "You will," he said, "when I tell you the story of the monk who became a fox. Hundreds of years ago, in this very temple, there lived a highly respected Zen master. People came from across the land to hear his teachings. One day, a young monk asked, 'Master, does an enlightened person still fall under the law of cause and effect?' The master smiled and replied, 'No. Once awakened, one transcends karma.' That night, a strange thing happened. The master died in his sleep, yet did not pass on. Instead, his soul was reborn as a fox, cursed to wander the forests beside the temple for 500 years. Every night he watched students come and go. He listened to their chants. He longed for his former robes, but the curse would not lift. Until one day a young monk sat beneath the full moon and heard the fox whisper his story. The monk was horrified. 'But master, you were wrong. Even the enlightened are subject to karma. Awakening does not erase the law. It transforms how we live within it.' The fox wept, and in that moment of truth, the curse was lifted. The fox died peacefully. The old monk's body was found in the forest the next morning, resting beside a stone marked with a single kanji. Cause. Kenji sat in silence. The fox rested its head on the old man's foot. "So," Kenji whispered, "karma never disappears." "No," said the man. "It is not punishment. It is echo." He leaned forward, voice low but firm. "Every act, every thought, every breath, it leaves a print, not to shame you, not to control you, but to teach you. You are part of everything." Kenji looked down. His hands trembled slightly. "What if I've caused harm?" he asked. "You have." Kenji flinched. "We all have," the man continued, "not because we are evil, but because we are human. The question is not, have you hurt someone? The question is, have you learned to bow to that truth and make amends with presence?" Kenji looked up. "Is it too late?" The man's eyes shimmered like lanterns over water. "It is never too late," he said, "to stop running and begin listening." In Western psychology, we often speak of shadow work, the process of facing the hidden parts of the self, guilt, shame, fear, unacknowledged harm. We speak of healing as self-acceptance, but Zen goes deeper. Zen says, see it, sit with it, bow to it. Let the fire burn through you, but do not turn away. Karma is not just what happens to you, it's what continues through you until you bring it into awareness. Avoidance feeds it, ownership transforms it. If you are here now, perhaps you carry something you've never spoken aloud, a wound you've caused, a lie you told, a kindness withheld, an apology left unsaid, and maybe, like the fox, you've been trapped, not by punishment, but by the refusal to face what your soul already knows. Let me tell you this gently. You are not your past, but you are responsible for how you carry it. And the moment you stop running, the moment you bow to the law of cause and effect, not with fear, but with humility, you begin to transform, not erase, but redeem. Kenji stood at the altar, his fingers brushing the edge of the candle's heat. He whispered, I hurt someone. Years ago. I never said sorry. I pretended it wasn't mine. The old man nodded, eyes soft. And now, Kenji exhaled. Now I want to stop pretending. The candle flame danced. The fox opened its eyes, stood, and walked toward him. It looked into Kenji's soul, not to judge, but to witness. And then, just as silently, it walked away, into the trees, into the dusk. Kenji did not follow. He stayed. Verse from the Buddha. The kind of seed sown will produce that kind of fruit. Those who do good will reap good results. Those who do evil will reap evil results. If you carefully plant a good seed, you will joyfully gather good fruit. Samyutta Nikaya, question for the soul. What truth have you run from that is asking you now, gently, humbly, to return and bow to it? A karma healing reflection. Sit quietly. Picture one action you regret. Do not explain it. Do not defend it. Just witness it. Bow your head. Whisper, I see you. I accept this thread, and I will walk in truth. Then breathe out and release it into the wind. This was the 7th turning of our path. Next, we will sit beside a bowl that holds the sky and explore the mystery of gratitude in the heart of emptiness. If this story touched a shadow inside you, let us know you're walking this path too. Subscribe to The Empty Boat. There is room for you here, mistakes and all. Story 8. The Bowl That Held the Sky. The morning light returned without ceremony. Kenji stood once more in the crumbling temple, where the fox had vanished and the old man now slept in stillness. The air was different, thinner, more tender. The kind of air that feels like a hush after a revelation. He bowed to the altar, then stepped into the path behind the temple. It curved downward through a grove of cedar, where the trees arched like monks in a walking meditation. The silence was full, not empty, and then he saw it, a small hut beside a still pond. Steam drifted lazily from the roof, as if the structure itself were breathing. Outside sat a woman, middle-aged, plain robe, hair bound in grey silk. In her hands she held a simple clay bowl, turning it slowly in the morning light. Her eyes were soft as rice paper. Her breath steady. Without words, she gestured to the mat beside her. Kenji sat. The pond was so still, it mirrored the sky perfectly. Clouds passed slowly across its surface like unhurried thoughts. The woman set the bowl down. Between them, it was empty. Kenji looked at it, then at her. Is it for tea? She shook her head gently. It's for sky. He blinked. She continued, voice like quiet rain. Most people want their bowl full, full of wealth, full of answers, full of praise. But sometimes the bowl must be empty enough to hold the sky. There once lived a wandering monk named Ryu, who travelled with only a robe, a bell, and a single bowl. In every village he would sit by the roadside and place his bowl before him, not to beg, but to receive. Sometimes the bowl was filled with rice, sometimes with ash, sometimes with spit, and sometimes nothing at all. One day a merchant saw him and laughed. How can you live with so little? Why would you let others decide your fortune? Ryu smiled. This bowl does not define me. It reveals me. The merchant scoffed. What does that even mean? Ryu tipped the bowl upside down. See? Empty again. But when I gaze into it, it holds the entire sky. My bowl cannot always be full, but it can always be open. Kenji stared at the bowl between them. It was simple, cracked near the rim, glazed in soft earth tones. But as the woman lifted it to eye level, the reflection of the sky bloomed within it, clouds drifting across the inner curve like forgotten prayers. I used to chase fullness, she said, success, clarity, healing. I thought if I could fill my life with enough, I would finally feel peace. She set the bowl down. But peace didn't come when I filled the bowl. It came when I honored its emptiness. Kenji looked at her, eyes stinging. He said nothing, only nodded, because he too had chased fullness, filled his days with effort, filled his mind with noise, filled his heart with expectation. And now all that remained was space, and strangely, gratitude. In today's world, we are conditioned to believe that empty is a problem. We fill calendars with tasks. We fill silences with chatter. We fill our carts, our shelves, our minds. But Zen teaches the opposite. It teaches that emptiness is not lack. It is potential. It is presence. It is the sacred space into which grace can pour. A bowl cannot receive if it is already full. A heart cannot soften if it is armored in expectation. And the soul cannot breathe when, strangled by ambition. True gratitude is not born when we get what we want. It is born when we can see what we already have and bow to it, even if it's silence, even if it's pain, even if it's a sky inside an empty bowl. The woman handed the bowl to Kenji. He held it with both palms. For a moment, it reflected only his own face, tired, unshaved, uncertain. Then the clouds returned. Then a wisp of sunlight. Then stillness. And for the first time, Kenji did not want anything. He did not seek a lesson. He did not reach for more. He simply held the bowl and let it hold him. If you are here now, perhaps you too have tried to fill your life so completely, you forgot the sacredness of space. Maybe you've measured your worth in productivity, tied your value to how full your days look, how busy your mind feels. But let me remind you, emptiness is not failure. It is invitation, an invitation to receive, not more, but deeper, deeper stillness, deeper breath, deeper truth. Let yourself be like the bowl, cracked, open, unashamed. And in that space, you may see the sky reflected back at you. A verse from the Buddha: emptiness is the track on which the centered person moves. Sutta Nipata. Soul reflection for this moment. Where in your life are you afraid of emptiness? And what might happen if you honored it instead? A small gratitude ritual. Tonight, light a single candle. Hold an empty bowl or cup. Sit with it in silence. Breathe. Let it represent your open self. Place your hand over your heart and whisper, I do not need more. I am enough. This moment is whole. Let the candle burn out slowly. Let your breath be the gift. Let the sky enter. This was the 8th reflection in our journey. In the next passage, we will cross a bridge that vanishes and walk into the space between certainty and loss. If this story placed a quiet sky inside your chest, leave a word in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and let's keep walking. Through stillness, through silence, through sky. Story 9. The Bridge That Vanished. Kenji had walked all morning along the banks of a wide river. The path had no name. The water beside him flowed with a quiet authority, unbothered by time. The sky was grey, not stormy, just undecided. The kind of sky that reflects the inside of a wandering mind. He was told there would be a bridge. But after hours of walking, there was only a stone marker in the earth, weather-worn, split at the center. Beside it, a pair of sandals, wooden, old, pointing toward the river, and nothing else. No structure, no rope, no crossing, just the slow churn of water. Kenji stood at the edge, breath catching in his throat. The river wasn't wild, but it was wide enough to remind him of everything he didn't know. He sat beside the sandals, uncertain, and then he heard footsteps behind him. An old man approached, neither hurried nor hesitant. His robes were damp, his eyes clouded with something older than sight. He carried no staff, no pack, only a thin bundle wrapped in linen. He stopped beside Kenji, nodded, and looked out at the river. "Waiting for a bridge?" the man asked. Kenji hesitated. "Yes," the man smiled softly. "So was I, until I learned the bridge was never meant to stay." Long ago, in a village split by river, there was a woman named Anzu who tended a small inn. Each day she watched travelers come and go, crossing the old, wooden bridge that connected the two halves of the valley. The bridge was her comfort, a constant. She had crossed it as a child, danced upon it at harvest festival, even wept on its beams the night her mother died. One winter, a storm came, unlike any other. The river rose like a voice long silenced. The current roared. By dawn, the bridge was gone, washed downstream like a forgotten promise. The village mourned. Anzu mourned more, but there was no time to grieve. The river still flowed. Children still needed bread. Life insisted on continuing. So, barefoot and afraid, Anzu stepped into the water. It was cold, relentless. She slipped. She shook, but she made it. And every day after that, she walked across, not because it was safe, but because it was necessary. Years later, a traveler asked her, "Why haven't they rebuilt the bridge?" She smiled and said, "Because sometimes we are meant to walk through the water." Kenji listened as the old man's voice melted into the sound of the river. "I once came here like you," he said. "I lost something, someone, everything I thought would last." He sat slowly, knees creaking. And I waited. I thought healing was the return of what I'd lost, that one day the bridge would reappear, and I'd walk back to how it was. He shook his head. But that bridge was never mine to keep. It was a gift, not a guarantee. Kenji felt his throat tighten. "So what do I do?" The old man looked at him, then down at the sandals. "You walk, even without a bridge. In our modern lives, we are told to plan for everything. Prepare, secure. Build systems, backups, and expectations. And yet, life doesn't ask for our permission to change. Bridges disappear. Jobs end. Lovers leave. Bodies fail. Certainties dissolve. And the soul hesitates. We sit on the banks of our own pain, waiting for something to reappear. But Zen whispers, there is no bridge. There is only now, and your feet, and the river. Kenji stood. The river seemed to hum. He looked at the old man. "Will I make it?" The old man smiled, eyes soft. "That's not the question." Kenji took a breath. "Then what is?" He pointed gently at the water. "The question is, will you step anyway?" Kenji stepped into the river. The cold climbed up his legs like memory. The current pulled softly, not to drown, but to remind him, this is real. This is risk. This is life. Halfway across he stopped. His feet trembled. There was no one guiding him now. Only the sound of water, wind, and breath. And it was enough. He reached the other side, soaked, shivering, smiling. There was no applause, only earth, only presence, only the quiet knowing. I moved forward without a bridge. If you're listening now, perhaps something in your life has fallen away. A relationship, a certainty, a role you once knew, a bridge you thought would always be there. And maybe you've been waiting on the riverbank, hoping it will return, hoping someone else will carry you, hoping not to get wet. But healing doesn't come through waiting. It comes through walking. You do not need to be fearless, only willing. The river is not your enemy. It is your crossing. Let it carry you. Let it cleanse you. Let it teach you the courage of uncertain steps. A verse from the Buddha. No one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. Dhammapada, reflection to hold tonight. What bridge have you been waiting to return? And what might happen if you step forward without it? A practice of gentle courage. Stand barefoot, if you can, on earth or floor. Close your eyes, lift one foot, pause, lower it slowly. Breathe. Say to yourself, I move forward, even if I do not see the way. Repeat. Trust each step. No bridge. Just now. This was the 9th step in our journey. In the next story, we will sit under unmoving clouds and listen to what stays when storms refuse to pass. If this story walked beside your fear, leave your print in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and keep walking, bridge or not. Story 10. When Clouds Refuse to Leave. Kenji stood in the field beyond the river, his robe still damp from crossing. The light had thinned into a pearled hush, the kind that blurs the line between afternoon and evening. The land was open now. No more thick groves or stone paths, just quiet earth, flattened by time, stitched with weeds and faded grass. But above him, the sky remained grey, not the dramatic grey of a coming storm, not the soft grey that makes room for stars, but the weighty, unmoving kind, clouds that linger not with rage, but with resignation. He walked slowly, unsure of where to go next. And then, across the misted field, he saw it. A small wooden hut, leaning slightly, smoke whispering from its chimney. Drawn by something he could not name, maybe the smell of firewood, maybe the simple invitation of shelter, he approached and knocked. A woman opened the door. Her eyes were deep, her face lined with the softness of someone who had known both sorrow and silence. She wore no ornaments, only a dark blue robe, and in her hands she held a bundle of herbs. Without asking who he was, she stepped aside. "You've brought the clouds with you," she said, not unkindly. Kenji glanced back at the endless sky. "They've been following me for days." She smiled faintly. "Then come in. Let them rest too." The inside of the hut was warm, dim, and filled with the scent of cedar, old paper, and boiling ginger. A single candle flickered beside a wooden bowl of black stones. Kenji sat near the fire, legs drawn up, hands outstretched. The woman handed him a cloth to dry his hair. He hesitated, then asked, "Do they ever leave?" She tilted her head. "Who?" "The clouds," he said. "The heaviness, the sadness that just stays." She placed the bundle of herbs into the boiling pot. The room filled with scent, clean, grounding. "They do," she said. "But not when chased away. Not when feared. Not when labelled as problems." She poured him a cup. They leave when you let them sit beside you long enough to finish their sentence. Long ago, in a temple nestled between cliffs and sea, there was a novice named Ichi who could not stop weeping. No one knew why. His body was strong, his mind quick, his robes clean, but his eyes always seemed wet. He wept during chanting. He wept during eating. He wept during walking meditation. The other monks grew impatient. "You disturb the silence," they said. "Perhaps you are not suited for this path." Ashamed, Ichi went to the master. "I am sorry, master," he said. "I cannot seem to find peace. I cry, and I do not know why." The master asked only one question. "Do the clouds explain themselves to the mountain?" Ichi looked up. "No, I suppose not." The master smiled. "Then stop asking your tears to speak logic. Let them speak feeling. Sit with them as the mountain sits with the sky." From that day forward, Ichi no longer apologized for his sorrow. He wept, he sat, he breathed, and eventually the tears slowed, not because he pushed them away, but because they were heard. Kenji held the warm cup close, letting the steam fog his vision. "I've tried to heal," he said softly. "I've meditated, I've walked, I've listened, but still, there's this sadness that doesn't move. It just sits in me like fog that never lifts." The woman stirred the pot, then sit with it, without trying to change it, without calling it wrong, without demanding a sunrise. She walked to the window and looked out at the pale field. There are clouds that pass like tourists and clouds that stay like ancestors. Each has its own purpose. Kenji looked down. But what if it never leaves? She turned, and her voice softened even further. Then it becomes part of your sky. In the world of psychology, persistent sadness is often pathologized, named, coded, medicated, minimized, and while treatment can be necessary and life-saving, there is also a sacred dimension of sorrow that medicine cannot reach. Some sadness is not a sign of disorder. It is a sign of depth, of having loved, of having lost, of having felt the weight of being alive. Zen teaches us not to fix every feeling, but to bow to them. Like monks bow to each other before meditation, not in defeat, but in reverence. You do not need to overcome your sadness to be spiritual. You only need to stop resisting its voice. Sit with it, like rain sits with rock. Eventually, the silence between you becomes compassion. Kenji stared into the fire. The woman sat across from him, sipping her own cup. No rush, no agenda, just the slow rhythm of breath. The fire popping softly, the clouds unmoved. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he did not ask his sadness to go. He let it breathe. He let it rest, and it did not grow. It did not shrink. It simply was, and so was he. If you are listening now, perhaps you too carry a cloud that won't leave. Maybe it arrived years ago. Maybe it came without a name. Maybe you've tried everything to outrun it. And maybe what you need is not a cure, but a chair. A quiet place beside your sorrow, where nothing needs to be explained. You are allowed to feel heavy. You are allowed to be still. You are allowed to carry the sky. The practice is not in removing the cloud, but in remembering. You are also the sky that holds it. A verse from the Buddha. Your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts. But once mastered, no one can help you as much. Dhammapada. A quiet question. What emotion have you been resisting? And what might shift if you welcomed it like a guest instead of a threat? A gentle practice. Sit or lie down. Place one hand over your chest. Say aloud, "It's okay, you can." Stay as long as you need. Imagine your sadness as a friend sitting beside you, not fixing, not judging, just breathing with you. Notice how the tightness softens when no one is asking it to disappear. You are not the cloud. You are the sky. This was the 10th step in our journey. Next, we will sit in silence with a master who never answered and discover how wisdom can speak even without words. If this story gave your sadness a place to rest, let us know in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat, where even unmoving clouds are part of the practice. Story 11. The Master Who Never Answered. Kenji had begun to notice the silence more than the sound, not just the absence of noise, but the living, breathing presence of stillness itself. It was everywhere now, in the leaves that paused before, falling in the spaces between footsteps, in the unspoken thoughts behind others' eyes. And it was leading him somewhere. A monk in the cloudy hut had given him directions, not instructions, just a gesture. 2 fingers pointing toward the east, and one word whispered through steam. Isho. Kenji didn't ask what it meant. He walked for half a day through pine forests so tall they made him feel like a child again. The path led him to a plain wooden gate. Beyond it, a courtyard raked in perfect lines, and at its center, a single-seated figure. Old, unmoving, facing a blank wall. Kenji stood for a moment, then stepped into the courtyard. No one greeted him. No voice welcomed or warned. The figure did not turn, did not flinch. Kenji sat down and waited. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. The figure never turned. Kenji coughed once, adjusted his robe, shifted his weight. Still nothing. Finally, as twilight began to bloom, Kenji said, "I came with a question." The figure remained silent. Kenji tried again. "I've walked far. I've seen the bell, the river, the fox, the sky. But still I don't know how to live fully, how to be free." The figure did not move. Kenji's throat tightened. "I'm asking you," he said. "Please, say something." But there was only the sound of wind across stone. Centuries ago, there was a master known as Isho. He was famous not for what he said, but for what he refused to say. Students from across the empire sought his wisdom. They brought questions, dilemmas, philosophies, and pain. To each, he gave the same response: silence. Some stayed for days, some left in rage, some stayed for years and left transformed. One student, frustrated, once shouted, "Why won't you answer me? Why won't you help?" Isho slowly pointed to the garden, where a leaf had just fallen onto the water basin. The student scoffed. "That's not an answer." Isho nodded and returned to silence. Years later, that same student wrote, "I thought I needed words, but I only needed to stop talking. His silence became my mirror, and in it, I saw the sky." Back in the courtyard, Kenji sat with clenched fists. Anger rose. The silence felt unbearable, but beneath it was something else. Grief. Not for someone, not even for something, but for all the moments he had filled with noise when silence had been enough. He wept. Quiet, restrained tears that had no shape or story. He wept not because he lacked answers, but because he was finally ready to stop demanding them. The seated figure, still facing the wall, spoke for the first time. "You are ready now." Kenji froze. For what? To hear what cannot be said. In our world, we worship explanation. We demand clarity. We dissect the mystery, name it, file it, control it. But Zen teaches us, not all wisdom comes in words. Not all healing comes from knowing. Not all truth can be spoken. Silence is not absence. It is presence, unfiltered. It is the place where the mind finally bows and the soul begins to speak. You cannot think your way into peace. You can only sit your way there and wait and breathe and stop needing the sound of certainty to prove you are okay. Kenji bowed deeply. The figure, still facing the wall, said, "Only this. Return to your breath. Return to the question. Do not answer it. Let it answer you." Kenji stood. For the first time in his journey, he did not need more. The silence had given him something fuller than explanation. It had returned him to the sacred space within, where presence lives. If you are listening to this now, perhaps you have been searching for answers. Why am I like this? What should I do? When will I be okay? And perhaps no answer has brought peace. Let me offer you this. Sit in silence, not to solve, but to be. Let the question echo. Let the wind pass through you. Let your thoughts settle like leaves on water. In time, you will realize the silence was always speaking. You simply forgot how to listen. A verse from the Buddha. Silence is an empty space. Space is the home of the awakened mind. Buddha soul invitation. What question do you keep asking aloud that might be answered more honestly in silence? A practice of wordless presence. Sit without music, without distraction. Light a candle. Face a blank wall or sky or tree. Place your hand over your heart. Do not ask for anything. Just listen. Let silence speak. Let it carry you inward. Let it teach you the language beneath language. This was the 11th step in our journey. Next, we will drift into a dream, a paper boat upon uncertain waters, and explore the hidden ache of expectations unmet. If this silence gave your soul a place to land, tell us gently in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and stay with us. We will not fill the void. We will honor it. Story 12. The Dream of the Paper Boat. The morning fog had thinned, but the chill remained. Kenji walked along the banks of a quiet stream, its water clear but slow, as if unsure of whether to move or stay. He carried no questions now, only breath, no destination, only rhythm. Ahead, beside a twisted pine, a child sat on a flat rock, her legs tucked beneath her, a square of rice paper in her hands. She was folding carefully, creased edges, folded corners, soft fingers moving with practiced grace. When she finished, she looked up and smiled at him. "It's a boat," she said, holding up her creation. Kenji smiled. "It's beautiful." She stood, walked to the edge of the stream, and set the paper boat gently on the surface. It floated for a moment, then spun lazily in place. "I wanted it to go far," she said, tilting her head. "But it's just turning." Kenji crouched beside her. "Sometimes the water decides the direction." The girl furrowed her brow. "But I made it. Shouldn't it go where I want?" He said nothing. She sighed, sat down again, and began folding another. There once lived a craftsman named Hideo, who dreamed of building ships. Not just any ships, great vessels of redwood and silk sails, ships that would carry royalty across oceans, ships that would be remembered. But he was born into a valley with no ocean, only streams, only small rivers too shallow for grand things. Still, he built. Year after year, he labored. Trees were carved, tools sharpened, visions mapped. But when the ships were finished, there was nowhere for them to go. They floated perhaps for a few meters. Then they lodged on rocks, drifted sideways, sunk in muddy beds. Hideo was heartbroken. One night, he sat beside the stream, defeated. He had spent a lifetime preparing for waters that never came. An old woman passed by, saw his tears, and asked, "What's wrong?" "I built ships for oceans," he said bitterly. She looked at the small stream, then at the great wooden vessel beside it. "Perhaps," she said, "it was never about crossing oceans. Perhaps your work was to teach the stream how to carry something beautiful." Kenji watched the second paper boat float farther than the first. Still not fast, still not far. But enough! The child beamed. "See?" she said. "It listened this time." He nodded. "Maybe it always was." She looked at him. "Do you ever feel sad when things don't go the way you planned?" He smiled. "Every day." She looked thoughtful. "My mother says I dream too much." "And what do you think?" She grinned. "I think the dream is mine, but the wind is not." Then, holding a third sheet of paper, she offered it to him. "Here, you try." In our adult world, we are told to build careers, goals, relationships, identities, expectations. We are told to plan for greatness, to strategize for success. But often, life doesn't unfold that way. The job disappears. The relationship dissolves. The health changes. The dream we clung to so tightly becomes a paper boat spinning in a shallow stream, and we grieve. Not because we were wrong to dream, but because no one taught us how to let the dream drift. Zen teaches us that impermanence is not betrayal, it is the stream, and we are the boat. Kenji folded the paper slowly. His hands, clumsy at first, began to remember childhood rhythms. He placed his creation on the water. It floated. It spun. It bumped into a stone. It kept going. He laughed. Not with irony, with wonder. The child clapped her hands. "Yours is braver than mine." He watched as it drifted downstream, soft edges carrying sunlight. "I used to build big dreams," he said. "Expectations so heavy they sank before they could sail." She looked up at him. "Did it hurt?" "Yes," he said. "But now I know. The point wasn't to arrive. The point was to float." If you're listening now, perhaps you too have built something in your life that didn't go as planned. A business, a love, a vision of who you thought you'd become, and maybe you've sat beside your own stream, wondering, what was it all for? Let me tell you gently. The beauty was never in how far it sailed. The beauty was in the hands that folded it, the courage that released it, the heart that watched it drift. There is grace in small journeys. There is poetry in letting go of direction. Let your dream become a boat. Let the stream decide, and trust that wherever it pauses is still part of the way. A whisper from the Buddha. You only lose what you cling to. Buddha, a reflection for soft evenings. What expectation are you ready to release, not in defeat, but in honor of your own unfolding? A gentle ritual. Write a small dream or expectation on a piece of paper. Fold it into a boat. Place it in water, a bowl, a stream, your imagination. Watch it float. As it moves, whisper, "Thank you for what you were. I now let you be what you need to be." Then, let go. Watch what remains. It may be peace. This was the 12th journey of our unfolding path. In the next story, we will sit beneath the moon with a cup of tea and rediscover the beauty of what is already here. If this dream helped your own boat float again, leave a message in the stream below. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and drift gently onward together. Story 13. A cup of tea. Under the moon. Night had fallen like a silk curtain. Kenji now walked through a wide open field, the stars silent above him, the earth warm beneath. He had no lantern, yet he wasn't afraid. The moon was full, round as a story untold, and it lit the path without asking permission. He passed by quiet stones, withered fences, a single plum tree humming in the wind, and then he saw her, an old woman seated cross-legged beside a small wooden tray. 2 cups, a teapot, nothing else, no shrine, no incense, no chanting, just tea. She looked up, smiled as if he had been expected, and gestured to the cushion across from her. Kenji sat. The moon hung above them, silent, clear, without comment. She poured the tea with no words, no ceremony. Steam rose into the night like a prayer without language. Kenji took the cup with both hands. Instinctively, it was warm, light, earthy, and for a while they drank in silence. Centuries ago, there lived a wandering monk who stopped at a farmer's hut and asked for shelter. The farmer had little, some rice, a wooden floor, and 2 chipped cups. "I'm sorry, I have nothing special to offer you," the farmer said, embarrassed. The monk smiled, held the cup gently and said, "This is the most special tea I've ever tasted." "Why?" the farmer asked. "Because you offered it, and because I'm here to receive it." The farmer blinked, and then, for the first time in his life, he tasted his own tea fully. Kenji looked at the woman. "Why do I feel more here than I've felt in temples?" She smiled, her eyes crinkling like thin clouds. "Because here, you stopped trying to be spiritual." He tilted his head. She poured more tea. "When you walk with a purpose, you miss the breeze. When you chant for meaning, you forget the silence between words. But when you sit, without needing anything to change, you begin to taste what was always there." She raised her cup. Tea. Kenji drank again, and this time he felt the texture of clay on his lips, the warmth against his palms, the subtle bitterness turning sweet as it touched his tongue. He wasn't thinking. He was tasting, and it was enough. In a world that teaches us to chase extraordinary moments, achievements, transformations, revelations, we often miss the holiness of the ordinary. We meditate to reach somewhere. We pray to get something. We seek signs, answers, proof. But Zen whispers, "This is it. This cup, this breath, this moon. There is no later moment more sacred than this one, fully met." The problem is not that life is mundane. The problem is we are too busy to see its magic. The old woman stood, walked a few paces, then returned with a bowl of plums. She placed one on Kenji's hand. "No words," she said, smiling. "Just eat." Kenji bit into the fruit. It was sour at first, then sweet, then sour again. He laughed. The woman nodded. "Like life." They sat in soft laughter, the kind that echoes longer than sound. Then, after a long silence, she said, "People travel far to find truth, but sometimes it hides in the cup you drink every day. If only you would stop to notice." She looked up at the moon. Most people never drink their own tea. Kenji set down his empty cup. He bowed, not just to her, but to the cup, to the tea, to the quiet moment that had asked nothing of him. And something inside him bowed as well. Not out of reverence, not even gratitude, just presence. If you are here now, perhaps you have been searching for meaning, in teachings, in signs, in dramatic awakenings, and maybe you've missed what's already in your hand. The warm drink, the sunlight through the curtain, the weight of your body resting on a chair, the sound of a breath entering and leaving. You do not need to wait for something bigger. You only need to taste what is. A sip, a breath, a moonbeam across your shoulder. This is your temple. This is your teacher. This is your tea. A verse from the Buddha. Drink your tea slowly and reverently, as if it is the axis on which the world turns. Thich Nhat Hanh, NHA reflection to hold tonight. What is the most ordinary thing in your life that might be quietly asking for your presence? A mindfulness ritual. Tonight, make a cup of tea or water. Sit with it. Feel the heat. Watch the steam. Drink slowly. Notice every shift in taste, every moment of sensation. Say aloud, "This is enough. I am here. I taste the sky in this sip." This was the 13th reflection on our path. In the next story, we'll climb to a mountain that keeps breathing and learn the wisdom of patience, one breath at a time. If this cup reminded you of something forgotten, leave your presence in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and keep sipping the stillness with us. Story 14. The Mountain That Kept Breathing. The path turned steep. Kenji had left the open fields and gentle streams far below. Now the air thinned, the trees gave way to stone, and the wind, though soft, began to sound like breath. It was not loud, but it was constant. He climbed slowly. The incline was not harsh, but it did not end. It curved and curved, wrapping him around the mountain's body like a thread on a spool of time. Every few steps, he paused. Not because he was tired, though he was, but because something inside him whispered, "Go slower, listen." As he ascended, he noticed something strange. The mountain seemed to be alive, not in a mystical sense, not with words or magic, but with rhythm. The wind came and went like lungs. The stones, warm under the sun, cooled like skin under cloud. The birds circled, left, returned. The silence pulsed, and Kenji began to feel. The mountain was breathing. There is an old Zen tale of a man named Genzo who sought enlightenment the way others seek a summit, by rushing. He meditated for 12 hours a day. He fasted. He studied scrolls. He recited mantras until his voice cracked. Still, peace did not come. He went to the temple, master, and asked, "Why do I feel no closer to truth?" The master pointed to the mountain behind the monastery. "Climb it," he said, "but do not stop until you hear it breathe." Confused but obedient, Genzo climbed. Days passed. He heard wind, water, his own breath, but not the mountains. Frustrated, he yelled at the sky, "Where is your breath, old stone? Speak!" A monk who had been tending a tree below called up to him. "It has always been breathing," the monk said. "But you were too loud to hear." Genzo sat. He stopped asking. He simply listened. After 3 days of silence, he felt the mountain. Inhale. And in that moment he realized he had never needed answers. He had only needed to slow down. Kenji reached a small ledge. There, tucked into the curve of stone, was a flat space, a fire pit made of broken rock, a wooden bench smoothed by time, and on that bench an old man sat, eyes closed, breath even. Kenji sat beside him without a word. The man opened one eye, smiled. "You heard it, didn't you?" Kenji nodded. "It breathes." The man chuckled. "So do you." Kenji closed his eyes, matched his breath with the wind, and for the first time, he noticed they were not separate. He had always been part of the mountain. He just hadn't known how to listen. In the world we live in, we are taught to rush. Faster goals, faster healing, faster growth, faster answers. But Zen reminds us, the mountain does not hurry, the breath does not chase, the soul does not bloom on command. The deepest truths are slow, slow to rise, slow to open, slow to speak, but when they do, they stay. We often give up too soon, on peace, on practice, on ourselves, because we do not hear instant music. But healing is not loud. It is mountain slow. It arrives not as thunder, but as wind whispering over stone. Kenji breathed in, felt the ache in his knees, the coolness on his skin, the vastness behind his closed eyelids. The old man beside him said, "Most people leave before the mountain can speak. They come for revelation. They expect clarity. But the mountain doesn't give answers. It gives presence." He touched his chest lightly. And presence is what heals. Kenji opened his eyes. The world looked the same, but it felt different, wider, deeper, quieter. He no longer needed the peak. He had already arrived. If you are listening now, perhaps you too have grown tired of rushing, of pushing, of waiting for breakthrough, of asking, "Why hasn't it come yet?" Let me remind you, you are not behind. You are unfolding, like stone warmed by slow sun, like pine trees drinking silence, like breath finding its rhythm after years of holding in. Do not ask yourself to bloom in a single morning. Sit with your own mountain. Feel your own breath. Trust that what you are becoming takes time. A verse from the Buddha. Be like the great earth, patient, unmoved, compassionate, and vast. Sutta Nipata question for tonight. Where in your life are you demanding speed? Where what's needed is stillness? A slow time practice. Sit, outside or by an open window. Feel the air. Breathe slowly. With each breath, say inwardly, "I trust slow things. I trust what I cannot rush. I trust this breath." Repeat. Let the rhythm slow your mind. Let the mountain within you breathe. This was the 14th moment in our shared path. Next, we will meet a man who chased enlightenment and learn how seeking too hard can become another form of running. If this breath slowed your day, leave your stillness in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and climb onward, not to reach the top, but to breathe all the way up. Story 15. The man who chased enlightenment. He ran, not with panic, but with purpose. Kenji had descended the mountain slowly, his body still carrying the rhythm of its breath. But as his feet returned to lower earth, something in him stirred again. A flicker of urgency, a tightening of thought, a whisper, "There's more." He didn't notice at first, just a faster step, a need to reach the next place. But by midday, he was walking with intention, with questions pressing again at his ribs like fists behind his breath. What's next? Where is the master who will give me the answer? When will I arrive? And as if the universe heard his acceleration, the path turned suddenly into stone, narrow and fast, and led him into a dry canyon carved by wind and time. There, standing atop, a boulder chanting loudly into the echoing sky, was a man in golden robes. He was tall, hair tied in a topknot, eyes fierce, and every movement, bow, breath, gesture, was sharp with conviction. Kenji approached slowly, unsure if he should speak, but the man turned and said, "Ah, another seeker." Kenji bowed. "I've been walking a long time." The man nodded. "Good, then walk faster." Kenji hesitated. "Why?" "To arrive," the man said, "to become enlightened." His name was Jorin. He had once been a merchant, clever, rich, admired. But at the age of 40, he abandoned his family, shaved his head, and declared himself a seeker of truth. But Jorin was not a monk of stillness. He ran, from temple to temple, mountain to mountain, master to master. He collected mantras like gold, quoted sutras like currency, practiced for hours without breath. He believed that enlightenment was a destination, a mountain peak, a light, a moment of arrival. So he hunted it, and every time he failed to feel it, he blamed the teacher, or the method, or himself. Then he would run again. Jorin invited Kenji to sit. The stone was hot beneath them, the wind dry. "You seem different," Kenji said. Jorin smirked. "Because I do not sleep. I do not pause. I burn." Kenji tilted his head. "Does it work?" "I've touched it," Jorin said. "Glimpses, moments, sparks." Kenji thought of the mountain, of the breath, of the old man who never rushed. He asked, "But are you at peace?" Jorin's eyes narrowed, and for a second, just one, Kenji saw the exhaustion beneath the flame. In the West, spiritual seeking often becomes performance, we read. We collect teachers. We meditate with one eye on the clock. We ask the universe to show up on schedule. We chase light the way we once chased wealth. But Zen does not reward pursuit. Zen rewards stopping. Not giving up. Stopping. Sitting. Emptying the bowl long enough for the sky to enter. Chasing awakening is like chasing your own shadow. You never catch it because you already are what you're looking for. The moment you stop running, the silence catches up. Kenji stood slowly. He bowed to Jorin. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Jorin looked startled. "You're not staying." Kenji shook his head. "I already found it." He turned and walked away. Not quickly, not dramatically, just honestly. The canyon echoed with wind. Behind him, Jorin watched the dust settle where Kenji's footsteps had been, and for the first time in a long time, he did not chant. He just sat and listened. If you are here now, perhaps you too have been running, from pain toward peace, from confusion toward clarity. And maybe your mind is tired of sprinting circles around the answer. Let me say it gently. You do not need to chase enlightenment. You only need to stop running from yourself. Truth is not over the hill. It is under your breath. It is here. Now, in this silence, this moment, this non-arrival. Stop. Sit. Let the seeker dissolve. What remains is enough. A verse from the Buddha. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Buddha a question to hold tonight. Where in your life are you sprinting towards something that quietness would give you for free? A stillness practice. Sit or lie down. Place a hand over your heart. Breathe slowly. Each time you feel the urge to move, to check, to plan, pause. Say inwardly, I am not chasing. I am arriving. Let your heartbeat be the only sound. Let stillness be the teacher. You are not late. You are not far. You are not lost. You are already home. This was the 15th step in our shared pilgrimage. In the next story, we will meet a candle, burning backward, and listen to the truths that only time can teach. If this story helped you slow your seeking, leave your stillness in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and keep sitting with us in the sanctuary beyond speed. Story 16. When the Candle Burned Backwards. Evening descended gently, as if it had walked slowly all day to meet him. Kenji found himself in a narrow corridor of earth, stone walls pressed close, the path lit only by the last stretch of light bleeding from the clouds. He had not planned to enter this place. It felt like walking into an old wound, the way the walls curved, the way the ground pressed into his feet, familiar, yet forgotten. Then, at the end of the passage, a door, small, made of cedar, carved with nothing but a spiral. He knocked once, no answer, but the door creaked open on its own. Inside, a room of shadows, clay walls, no windows, no voice, only a single, strange candle flickering on the floor, its wax flowing upward against gravity, its flame not devouring, but restoring. The wick seemed to grow as time passed, and beside the candle, an elderly monk sat with eyes closed, palms facing the floor, as if grounding something ancient. Kenji sat opposite him. He whispered, "Why does the candle burn backward?" The monk opened his eyes slowly. "Because not all flames are meant to consume." Kenji watched in silence. The monk continued, "This candle does not burn the future. It heals the past. There once lived a woman named Keiko who could not let go of yesterday. She wore her regrets like beads around her neck. She replayed every loss, every mistake, every word she should have said but didn't. Even in meditation, her thoughts crawled backwards. To lost lovers, to childhood pain, to doors she never opened. She begged her teacher for a practice to forget. But the teacher said, "Forgetfulness is not freedom. You must return, not to relive, but to release." He gave her a candle. "Each evening," he said, "sit with it. But this is no ordinary candle. It will not light the future. It will draw light into the places where you left your own." At first, she saw nothing. But after weeks, as the flame danced backwards, she remembered not just the pain, but the stillness before the pain. Not just the heartbreak, but the open heart that once loved. And with each memory held gently, a little, wax reversed its melt, until one day her candle stood tall again. Back in the room, Kenji stared at the strange candle. The monk reached beneath his robe and handed him a folded piece of silk. Inside it, a letter, written in a younger hand. Kenji opened it, his own handwriting. It was a letter he had written 10 years ago, never sent, never spoken aloud. A letter of apology, a letter to someone he once loved and left. He read it slowly. Every word was a pulse, every line a doorway. And when he finished, he didn't cry. He exhaled deeply. The monk said nothing, but the candle grew just slightly taller. In the modern world, we treat the past like a graveyard. We either avoid it entirely, pretending we've moved on, or we dig through its bones endlessly, hoping to explain our pain away. But Zen offers a third way, not forgetting, not analyzing, but sitting with, holding the past like a child, not to fix it, but to let it be held, at last. Memory is not a mistake, it is a mirror, and when we sit beside it with compassion instead of shame, we allow the parts of us left behind to return. This is what the backward candle teaches. Not to undo, but to remember without breaking. Kenji looked at the monk. "Can I stay?" The monk smiled. "You already have." Kenji sat longer. He placed the old letter on the floor beside the candle. Its wax flowed upward, flickering not in fire, but in grace, and something inside him began to forgive. Not just others, himself. If you are listening to this now, perhaps your past has been knocking on the back door of your thoughts. Perhaps you've avoided it, or drowned in it, or tried to outrun it with distractions. Let me speak gently. You are not what happened to you. You are not what you failed to say. You are not the mistake you made in the dark. But you are the one who can sit with it now, with open breath, with still hands, with a backward burning candle. Let yourself remember not to punish, but to release. Let your memories breathe, and they may just let you go. A verse from the Buddha. In the past, this mind has been untamed, uncontrolled, and obsessed. But now, I shall train it gently and bring it home. Majjhima Nikaya, reflection to hold softly tonight. What memory have you tried to forget that now asks to be witnessed instead? A healing practice. Sit in the dark. Light a single candle. Hold an object or word from your past, real or imagined. Whisper, "You may stay. I will not turn away." Breathe. Then watch the flame. Let the light return to where it was lost. Let forgiveness be the fire that rises upward, without smoke. This was the 16th step in our shared unfolding. Next, we will meet a monk who once loved a flower and explore how to hold love without possession and beauty without fear of loss. If this story drew a circle of light around your memory, leave a quiet mark in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat, and let's keep drifting together into the tenderness beyond time. Story 17. The Monk Who Loved a Flower. The path had softened again. Kenji walked through a garden at dawn, not neatly kept, but wild in the way only nature knows how to arrange itself, deliberate yet unplanned. Flowers bloomed in disarray, white, yellow, violet, some already bowed in their final hours. The air held the scent of nectar, of memory. He wandered slowly, tracing his fingers along leaves without plucking, listening without asking. And there, near the center of the overgrown garden, he found a monk kneeling before a single lotus. He wasn't chanting, wasn't bowing, just he's looking. Kenji stopped several paces away, unsure whether to interrupt. The monk spoke without turning. "She's dying today." Kenji stepped closer. "The flower?" The monk nodded. "I've watched her bloom for 13 mornings, and today is her last." His voice held no sadness, only tenderness. Kenji asked, "Are you going to pick her?" The monk turned, smiled gently. "Would you cut the sky in half just to keep the sunrise in your pocket?" Kenji lowered his gaze. They sat together in silence as the flower swayed. Long ago, there was a young monk named Taira who had taken a vow of non-attachment with great pride. He gave up luxuries, recognition, even words. But one day, while tending the monastery's small garden, he found a strange flower growing beside the stones. It was not planted. It simply arrived. Each morning, he visited it. At first, in curiosity, then in affection, then in love. He did not touch it, did not water it, did not speak to it. He simply sat. But as the days passed, anxiety crept in. What if someone steps on it? What if a storm comes? What if it dies while I sleep? So he dug it up and moved it to a pot near his room. At first it thrived. Then it wilted. No storm, no harm, just decay. He wept. The abbot found him the next morning and asked, "Why are you grieving?" Taira said, "Because I loved it." The abbot said, "No, you tried to keep it." Then he pointed to the empty patch of dirt in the garden. "Love is not possession," he said. "Love is presence." Kenji looked at the monk. "Have you ever wanted to hold something forever?" The monk chuckled. "Of course, I'm human." Kenji nodded slowly. "So how do you love without holding on?" The monk's eyes sparkled. "You become the soil, not the vase." Kenji frowned. "The vase confines," he continued. "It holds beauty captive. The soil simply receives and lets go when the time comes." They watched as the flower leaned in the breeze, one petal falling into the monk's open palm. He did not close his fingers. He let the wind take it again. In modern life, we confuse love with control. We say, "I love you," but mean, "I need you." We fear loss so deeply that we try to freeze what is alive. We build altars of memory and cages of expectation. But Zen teaches, to love something is to allow it to pass through you, not to store it in a jar. Beauty is not impermanence. It is in witnessing something bloom freely and bowing to its exit with the same grace. What if love didn't mean keeping? What if it meant being there fully and letting go? Kenji reached for the flower, not to pluck it, but to rest his hand near its stem. He whispered, "Thank you." The monk nodded. "She heard you." They sat until the sun climbed higher, until the shadow of the flower stretched longer than the stem itself. Kenji stood, bowed low and said, "I once broke a heart by holding it too tightly. I thought that was love." The monk replied, "That was fear. But fear can transform." Kenji stepped away. He did not look back. Not because he didn't care, but because he finally did. If you are listening now, perhaps there is something, or someone, you have tried to hold on to. A person, a season of life, a beauty you feared would fade, and maybe it did. Or maybe it's still blooming, and you're afraid of what happens next. Let me offer you this. Love is not about keeping. It is about seeing, fully, deeply, tenderly, and bowing to change when it comes. Do not grip the flower. Sit beside it, and when it begins to fall, open your palm. Let beauty be what it is. Not a possession, but a gift, a verse from the Buddha. Whatever is subject to arising is all subject to cessation. Samyutta Nikaya, reflection for your heart tonight. What or who have you tried to keep frozen in time? And what would it feel like to love it without needing it to stay? A practice of non-grasping love. Sit in quiet. Picture something or someone you love. Whisper to it, I love you not because I own you, but because I see you, and I will not cage your wings. Breathe. Feel the ache. Feel the peace that follows. You are the soil. Let love land gently, and let it go freely. This was the 17th moment in our shared journey. In the next story, we will walk with the rain and learn how sadness can smile, quietly, behind the clouds. If this story reminded you how to love gently, leave a whisper in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and let the wind carry us from blooming to falling, from presence to peace. Story 18. The smile behind the raindrop. The rain had returned, not with violence, but with grace. A steady hush across the land, as if the sky were offering its tears, not out of sorrow, but out of relief. Kenji walked slowly beneath a broadleaf canopy, the ground soft beneath his feet, the scent of earth rich with renewal. He did not try to avoid the water. He let it touch him, let it soften the edges of his thoughts. Let it enter the silence that had begun to grow roots inside him. And there, beside a shrine made of stone and moss, sat a woman with an umbrella, not to shield herself, but to catch the rain. Each droplet fell into the fabric, like a bell. Kenji paused, watched. The woman turned, smiled warmly. You look like a man who's forgotten how to cry. Kenji bowed. I don't cry much. She nodded. Then you must be carrying a very full cup. She patted the space beside her. Come, let the sky cry for you a while. There once lived a man named Hajime who had mastered the art of hiding his sadness. He smiled at funerals, laughed during storms, offered advice when what he needed was to be held. He believed sadness made him weak, vulnerable, a burden. So he wore strength like a mask, until one spring his daughter fell ill, and in her final moments she said, It's okay to cry, Papa. I've saved space for your tears. She died holding his hand, and he said nothing. For years after, he stayed dry, until one day, standing in the rain, he heard her voice again. It's raining, Papa. You can borrow these drops. And so, for the first time, he let his face go soft. Let his chest ache. Let the rain fall for both of them, and in that surrender, he smiled. Kenji sat beside the woman. They said nothing for a long while. Then he asked, Can sadness and joy live together? She closed the umbrella. Let the rain fall directly on her shoulders. They already do, she said. We just forget how to listen. Kenji looked out at the field beyond them, mist clinging to grass, trees bowing slightly under the weight of moisture, he whispered. Sometimes I feel broken for not being happy. She looked at him gently. And sometimes I feel broken for being happy while I'm still grieving. She took his hand. Neither of us is broken. We're just learning to carry both cups. In our culture, sadness is often silenced. We treat joy as the goal and anything less as failure. But Zen holds no such judgment. Zen says, the sky does not apologize for rain. The lotus does not regret growing from mud. The heart can ache and still be whole. We are taught to fix our sadness. But what if sadness was not a mistake? What if it was a teacher? Not of pain, but of softness. What if the tears we avoid are the waters that grow our deepest roots? Kenji leaned back. Let the rain touch his face. He closed his eyes, and in the quiet space between thoughts, he felt something stir. Not a sob, not a smile, but both. A warmth that arrived not after the sadness, but through it. He let a tear fall, indistinguishable from the raindrops. The woman whispered, "There it is." He opened his eyes. She was smiling. So was he. If you are listening to this now, perhaps you've been waiting to feel better before letting yourself be fully alive again. Maybe you've hidden your tears, postponed your grief, laughed too soon, just to ease the room. Let me offer this truth. Sadness is not the absence of joy, and joy is not the denial of sorrow. They are siblings. They are rain and sunlight, each completing the sky. You do not have to get over it to smile again. You can cry and still sing. You can grieve and still grow. Let your sadness breathe. Let your joy return without guilt. A verse from the Buddha. Both suffering and happiness are of the mind. When we touch one deeply, we touch the other. Thich Nhat Chin A reflection for the heart. What emotion have you denied in the name of strength? And what if allowing it is the strongest thing you could do? A tender practice. Sit with a bowl of water in front of you. Each drop you add is a feeling you've held. Grief, joy, regret, hope. After naming them quietly, place your hand in the water. Let it hold them all. Let yourself be held. Then dry your hands and go softly. You are allowed to feel it all. This was the 18th story in our shared path. In the next tale, we'll meet a robe that washed away pride and learn how humility is the doorway to true freedom. If this story let your heart breathe a little more freely, leave a raindrop in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat, and let's keep floating together through sky and storm alike. Story 19. The Robe That Washed Away Pride. Kenji arrived at the foot of a stream by late morning. The sky had cleared. The rain had passed. The world glistened, not loudly, not triumphantly, but in a quiet, grateful kind of way. Everything looked rinsed. He crossed a small stone bridge, smooth and worn. On the other side stood a woman, tall, wrapped in a monk's robe, so faded it looked like river mist. She was kneeling by the stream, washing her robe by hand. No brush, no soap. Just rhythm. Her movements were slow, deliberate, each dip and squeeze a form of prayer. Kenji bowed lightly. She nodded, never pausing her task. He sat on a nearby rock, not wishing to disturb her silence. After some time, she spoke without looking up. This robe once belonged to a man who thought he was enlightened. Kenji raised an eyebrow. And what happened? She lifted the robe from the water. He met the river. There once lived a monk named Aikan, revered across the mountains for his teachings. He spoke often of humility, emptiness, ego loss. People bowed deeply as he passed. They travelled far to hear him speak. He was offered the finest teas, the softest mats, the brightest candles. And slowly, without noticing, he began to believe his own silence made him better. He did not correct people when they praised him. He began to walk slightly slower, with an air of gravity. He began to meditate, not with curiosity, but performance. One day, an old washerwoman asked him to help carry her robes down to the stream. He declined. "I must protect the robe," he said. "It is the mark of the vow." She looked at him, smiled faintly, and said, "If your robe fears the river, perhaps it is not the robe that is holy." That night, the wind stole his garment from the drying rack. He searched frantically. Without it, he felt naked, not just in body, but in identity. He found it 3 days later, caught in a thorn bush, covered in mud and spider silk. Shaking, he took it to the river. As he washed it, he began to weep. Not because it was ruined, but because he saw clearly, for the first time, how attached he had become to being a monk. He stayed by the river for a week, washing it again and again, not to clean the robe, but to cleanse the self he had stitched into its threads. Kenji watched the woman lift the robe, now rinsed and dripping from the stream. She laid it flat across a warm stone. "It's not the robe," she said. "It's what we wear in it." Kenji looked down at his own robes, simple, travel-worn, but now suddenly heavy with meaning. "I've been proud," he admitted, "for walking, for asking questions, for searching like a proper student." She turned to him, eyes clear. "Pride is not the problem. Believing your path makes you better than others, that's where the suffering hides." She gestured to the stream. "This water touches every stone equally." In modern life, pride hides in subtler forms, not just vanity or arrogance, but spiritual superiority. Moral high ground. The belief that, "I know better now." We trade material ego for refined ego. We boast of our stillness, curate our humility, present ourselves as awakened. But Zen teaches, the moment you begin to hold your identity, even as the one who lets go, you've already grasped. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's the robe being just cloth, the path being just walking, the insight being just wind passing through. Kenji took off his robe slowly. He walked into the stream. Knee-deep, he submerged the fabric, felt the weight pull gently. It resisted, then relaxed. He washed it without rush, without symbolism, without need. When he emerged, he laid it beside the woman's robe. Both cloths steamed in the sun like resting animals. She handed him a small stone. "For your pocket," she said, "so you always remember, you are not the robe, not the role, not the story." He held the stone in his palm. It was round, smooth, unremarkable, but it felt honest. He smiled. "Thank you." She bowed, and for a moment they were just two people. Not teacher, not seeker, not monk, not master. Just breath, just water, just sun warming the past out of the threads. If you are listening now, perhaps you've carried pride in your healing, pride in your pain, pride in your identity, pride in your spiritual progress. And maybe it has begun to weigh on you, even as you try to let go. Let me say this gently. You are not your robe, not your image, not your insight. You are the one beneath it all, the one washing gently, the one willing to meet the river. Let go of needing to be the awakened one, and return to being the open one, the one still learning, still softening, still enough. A verse from the Buddha. Just as a polished mirror reflects clearly, so too does a mind cleansed of pride see the truth as it is. Dhammapada. Reflection for the day's end. What part of your spiritual self-image has become a mask? And what might it feel like to take it off? A practice of release. Hold a piece of clothing you wear often, Close your eyes. Whisper, I am not this. I am the breath beneath. Then fold it with care, not as armor, but as fabric. Let the person beneath emerge and thank them. They've waited quietly beneath your titles. This was the 19th turn in our journey. Next, we will sit beside an old man and an empty chair and reflect on love, loss, and what remains when nothing is left to say. If this story helped you loosen what no longer fits, leave a stone in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and keep walking light beyond all robes. Story 20. The Old Man and the Empty Chair. The house looked abandoned from the outside, just a low structure at the edge of a field, half swallowed by weeds, with a porch that sloped slightly, as if leaning toward memory. The door was open, swinging, just a little in the breeze. Kenji paused at the gate. He hadn't meant to find this place, but something in the stillness called to him, not like an invitation, but like a whisper he already knew. He stepped inside. The floor creaked. Dust hung in the air like breath held too long. Along the back wall, 2 chairs faced a low wooden table. One chair was empty, the other was occupied. An old man sat with his hands folded in his lap. His gaze was soft, but steady, fixed on the empty seat. He didn't turn when Kenji entered, didn't blink. Kenji waited, then finally asked, "Is someone coming?" The old man smiled faintly. She already came. She just never left. There once lived a potter named Tozan, who had spent 50 years shaping clay, with hands that trembled only when they touched something too dear. He had a wife, gentle, sharp-eyed, who never spoke more than she needed. Every evening after the kiln cooled, she would sit beside him in the same chair. They wouldn't speak much. Just watch the sky lean toward indigo, drink warm tea, and let the day fall around them like petals. Then, one winter, she grew ill. When the final breath left her lips, she smiled as if she had only stepped into another room. Tozan buried her beneath the cherry tree, not with fanfare, but with hands that touched the earth like they once touched clay. The next night, he set 2 chairs by the window, just like always, and every night after, he sat, not in grief's fire, not in denial, but in presence. He did not speak to the empty chair. He simply refused to fill it with noise. And slowly it became a kind of altar, not to sorrow, but to stillness. Kenji stood beside the man now. "She was your wife?" The man nodded. 62 years. Kenji glanced at the empty chair. "Why keep it there?" The man smiled gently. "Because the love doesn't leave just because the body does." Kenji sat quietly, letting the words settle. After a while, he asked, "Does it still hurt?" The old man's eyes shimmered. "Some days, yes. But now, the ache is soft. It's not a wound anymore. It's a room." He gestured to the space between the chairs. "I come here to sit in that room." Kenji closed his eyes, and he felt it too. Not the woman, but the love. In modern grief, we are told to move on, to pack away the reminders, to fill the silence, to smile sooner than we're ready. But Zen does not rush sorrow. Zen says, let grief become your teacher. Let it sit with you like a guest, not forever, but long enough for the silence between you to become kindness. Love does not end when a person dies. What ends is the dialogue. What remains is presence. And if we are patient enough, we will find that even emptiness holds hands with memory. Kenji watched as the old man poured tea. 2 cups. He placed one on the empty table space beside the chair. She liked jasmine, he said softly. Kenji didn't respond. He didn't need to. They drank in silence. The sun fell lower, pressing warm light across the wooden floor. A breeze moved the curtain like a breath that had not yet gone. And in that moment, Kenji saw something clearly. There is no such thing as getting over love. There is only learning how to live beside it, even when the seat remains empty. If you are listening now, perhaps you've lost someone, to death, to time, to silence, and maybe you've been told to move forward. Let me offer something gentler. You don't need to rush your grief. You only need to keep the chair open. Not so you can wait, not so you can ache, but so you can remember that love leaves traces. In breath, in rooms, in sunlight, through windows, at the hour they used to speak. You are allowed to sit with it. You are allowed to feel both full and hollow. Let the chair remain. Let the silence become sacred. A verse from the Buddha. Those we love never truly leave us. They live on in the kindness we offer, the silence we hold, and the breaths we remember to take. Adapted Zen versa reflection for tonight. What have you lost that still sits beside you quietly, and how might you honor it without clinging? Gentle remembrance ritual. Set out 2 chairs if possible. Light a candle. Sit in one. Let the other remain empty. Say aloud, I miss you. I thank you. I carry you not in memory, but in being. Then breathe. Let the room become whole again, not because they return, but because you remained open. This was the 20th echo in our journey. In the next story, we will listen to the wind that taught us to stay and learn how running from discomfort often means running from ourselves. If this story gave your loss a place to rest, share a whisper in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and let's keep sitting quietly, together, even with empty chairs. Story 21. The wind that taught me to stay. Kenji stood at the edge of a wide open plain. The grass moved in waves, like a sea dreaming of being sky. Wind passed through his robes, not cold, but insistent, like a hand tugging at his sleeve. He had been walking for hours, not toward anything, but away. He didn't know why. He just couldn't sit still. Not after the empty chair. Not after that silence. Something inside him stirred. A vague itch behind the ribs. A flicker of impatience. The ghost of old loneliness, perhaps, or the pressure to keep moving, as if stillness were a kind of giving up. And then he heard it. Not a voice. Not quite, but a whisper that came with the wind. Why do you keep leaving? He turned. There, on a weathered mat laid under a twisted tree, sat a woman with hair like woven dusk. Her eyes were closed, her back straight, her hands resting on her knees, as though they'd been there for years. She hadn't spoken, not with her lips, but the wind had carried something from her stillness, and it had touched his question. He walked over, sat across from her. She opened her eyes slowly. Running again? She asked, as though they'd spoken before. There once lived a monk named Arata who could not stay in one place. He'd taken the vows, shaved his head, worn the robe, but he wandered, from forest to forest, temple to temple, master to master, not in rebellion, but in discomfort. Every time he sat to meditate, his legs ached, his thoughts raced, his skin crawled. A memory surfaced, an old wound knocked. So he moved. I am restless, he told one master. Perhaps this path is not mine. The sage master gave him a single task: sit with the wind. So Arata did. For days he sat beneath a tree. The wind came, the wind left. At first he hated it. Too cold, too wild, too unpredictable. But eventually, he stopped bracing, and something strange happened. He began to listen to its tone, its timing, its truth. And one day, the wind whispered, "I am not what disturbs you. I am what reveals what was already unsettled." From that day forward, Arata stopped traveling, not because he had nowhere to go, but because he finally arrived. Kenji looked at the woman. "How did you know I was running?" She smiled, not unkindly. "Because I spent 30 years doing the same." He sighed. "It feels safer to move." She nodded. "Of course, stillness can feel like exposure, like sitting beneath your own shadow." He looked down. "How did you stop?" She tilted her head. "I didn't. I stayed long enough for the running to stop on its own." Then she closed her eyes again. The wind picked up. Kenji felt it pass over him, not as something to resist, but as something ancient, something honest. He stayed. In modern life, stillness is a lost language. We are taught to chase, to scroll, to flee pain through productivity, to run from sadness through stimulation. But Zen teaches, the discomfort is not the enemy. It is the doorway. The wind is not what pushes us. It is what shows us what cannot stay anchored. When we run, we carry our ache with us. But when we stay, we give it space to soften. What if you didn't have to fix the discomfort? What if you only had to sit with it as it told its story and passed like wind through trees? Kenji folded his legs beneath him. He placed his palms on his knees. He closed his eyes. The wind came again. This time, he did not flinch. He felt the tension in his belly, the swirl in his mind, the faint hum of doubt, and he whispered, "I'm not leaving." The tree above them swayed. The woman opened one eye just for a moment and smiled, then closed it again, and the world grew quiet, not because the wind had stopped, but because he no longer fought it. If you are listening now, perhaps you too have been moving from moment to moment, from place to place, from discomfort to distraction. Let me offer this. You do not need to flee what you feel. You only need to stay long enough to let it speak. Discomfort is not a flaw, it is a visitor. Invite it in, sit beside it, listen without solving, and eventually it will bow and leave. A verse from the Buddha. As a rock is unmoved by wind, so too is the wise heart unmoved by praise or blame, pain or joy. Dhammapada. Question for quiet reflection. What feeling have you been outrunning? And what might it teach you if you stayed just a little longer? A practice of staying. Sit for 5 minutes. When a sensation arises, tightness, boredom, sadness, do not move. Name it gently. Restlessness. Say, you may stay, then breathe. Let the wind pass through you. Let the stillness remain. This was the 21st breath of our shared journey. Next, we will hear the bell ring only once and explore how every moment is complete, even when it does not repeat. If this story helped you stay for just a moment longer, leave your stillness in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and let's remain together wherever the wind places us. Story 22. The bell rings. Once, then never again. The valley was quiet when Kenji arrived. Not the kind of quiet that asks for attention, but the kind that comes after something has passed. He walked slowly, barefoot now, his sandals tied to his sash. The ground beneath him was cool and firm. Above him, pine branches swayed like slow breath, and there it was, a small bell tower standing alone at the edge of a cliff, looking out over the vast horizon. A single bronze bell, dark with age, suspended by thick ropes, untouched. There was no monk tending it, no ceremony, no incense smoke, just the bell. Kenji stepped closer. At its base sat a woman, elderly, with a bowl of rice in her lap. She ate without rush, looking neither at the view nor at him. He bowed. "Is this the bell of the temple?" She smiled with her eyes, but did not stop chewing. It was. Kenji glanced upward. "It hasn't rung in a while." She swallowed, then said, "It rang once. That was enough." There was once a small village nestled between two rivers, where every morning the monks would ring a bell to signal the beginning of the day. It was a soft bell, deep, full, one that filled the whole body like warm tea in cold hands. One year, the oldest monk, keeper of the bell, died. The villagers gathered, waiting for the sound the next morning. But the bell did not ring. When asked why, the abbot said, "He rang it with his whole heart, not out of routine, but out of presence, until someone else can ring it that way, it shall remain still." Years passed, monks came and went, but the bell never rang again. Children grew up wondering what it sounded like. Old men claimed to still hear it in the wind, and one morning, many years later, a traveller passed through. He sat beneath the tower, unaware of its history. He meditated, breathed, and found his heart still. Then, without knowing why, he reached up and pulled the rope. The bell rang once, only once, but the sound echoed through every home, every field, every heart in the village. And then the bell was silent again. Not because it had broken, but because the moment had been enough. Kenji sat beside the woman. They watched the horizon for a while. He asked softly, "What did it sound like?" She closed her eyes, like all the grief in the world exhaling, like your own name whispered by someone who knows you, but never spoke it aloud, like truth, but only for a breath. Kenji's throat tightened. He whispered, "Why not ring it again?" She opened her eyes. Because it would be trying to recreate what cannot return. She handed him the rice bowl. He accepted, chewed slowly, and for a moment, the sound of the world quieted. In today's world, we chase repetition. We want what was good to last. We want what felt sacred to come again. We believe joy must return in the same shape. That insight must echo. That moments must be captured and replayed. But Zen teaches, some things ring once, and that is their perfection. The moment you stop asking the bell to repeat, you begin to hear its echo in everything, in laughter, in grief, in stillness. There is no need to grasp, just bow once, and let go. Kenji stood and walked to the bell. He placed his hand on the worn wooden mallet. He did not lift it. He only closed his eyes, and in his chest, he heard the sound, a single, full tone, without source, without end. The woman said, "That's the real bell." He opened his eyes. It rings when you don't ask it to. If you are here now, perhaps you've been holding on to a moment from the past, a goodbye you want to undo, a joy you hope will return, a feeling you try to summon again and again. Let me offer this. The bell rang. It rang once, and that was enough. You don't need to hear it again. You only need to carry its echo. Let it shape how you breathe, how you sit, how you love. This moment now, this one you're in, is ringing too. Listen. Closely, it's already enough. A verse from the Buddha. Nothing ever happens twice. In every breath, a beginning and an ending. See the truth of this, and be free. Zen Koan, adapted reflection for your heart tonight. What sacred moment in your life have you been trying to repeat? And what would happen if you simply bowed to it once more and let it go? A mindfulness practice of finality. Light a candle. Sit in silence. Remember a moment that changed you. A love, a loss, a turning. Bow to it. Whisper, once was enough. Thank you. Blow out the flame. Feel what remains. The echo is yours now. This was the 20-second tone in our shared journey. Next, we will sit beside a seed that waited in silence and learn the power of slow growth, unseen transformation, and inner trust. If this story let you release what you've been holding too tightly, leave an echo in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and let the silence ring with us through time. Story 23. The Seed That Waited in Silence. Kenji came to a place where nothing seemed to be happening. No shrines, no gardens, no monks waiting with wisdom. Just dry soil, low hills, and wind weaving through scrub brush like a thought that hadn't fully formed. He stopped at the edge of a sunken field. Brown, cracked and silent. No colour, no sound of birds, no signs of life. But something felt alive. He sat on a flat stone nearby and waited, unsure for what. And then he saw him, an old man with dirt under his fingernails, barefoot, walking slowly across the cracked earth. In his hand, a single wooden staff. Over his shoulder, a sack slung low, sagging with what seemed to be nothing. The man came close, looked at Kenji and asked, "You feel it too?" Kenji hesitated. "Feel what?" The old man smiled and pointed at the ground. The waiting. There once was a seed buried in the soil of a sacred forest. It was not planted by a hand. It arrived by wind or bird or accident. But once there, it stayed. For days it waited, then weeks, then months. All around it, other seeds sprouted, tiny green shoots pushing bravely into light. But this seed remained still. Something's wrong with me, it thought. I'm not growing. I'm behind. I'm failing. But what it did not know was that it had landed upon stone, and before it could rise, it had to break downward, to root, through rock to pierce darkness, to build a system strong enough to carry a tree, and so it rooted in silence, unseen, until one morning, without effort, a green sprout rose into the air, not weak, not late, but deeply ready. Kenji looked out over the barren field. "What is this place?" he asked. The old man sat beside him. This was once a lotus field, but fire came, took everything. Kenji's breath caught. "And now?" The old man ran his hand through the dirt. "Now, the seeds sleep." He held up a small dry pod. Lotus seeds can wait decades. They know when to rise, but only when the water returns, only when the sun calls. Kenji held the pod in his palm. It felt like nothing, but in its stillness, he could sense promise. The old man whispered, "You too are a seed. Stop digging yourself up every time you can't see growth." In modern life, we equate change with speed. We want progress we can post-transformation, we can explain. Healing that comes with visible proof. But Zen teaches, the deepest growth happens underground. The soul roots first, then rises. And silence is not absence, it is preparation. We often judge ourselves too soon. I should be better. I should be further. I should feel more. But you are not behind. You are rooting, and that cannot be rushed. Kenji sat in silence. The field around him didn't bloom, but he felt it. The quiet beneath. Something moving slowly. Something true. He placed the seed on the ground in front of him, covered it with a handful of earth, whispered nothing, and bowed, not to a result, but to the process, not to arrival, but to readiness. If you are here now, perhaps you felt like nothing is happening. You've been still. You've been patient. You've done the work. But the surface remains unchanged. Let me tell you, your roots are growing, even if no one sees, even if you forget. Trust the darkness. Trust the waiting. Growth doesn't always feel like blooming. Sometimes it feels like breaking, like resting, like becoming strong enough to carry what comes next. The seed does not rush the sun, and neither should you. A verse from the Buddha. As a solid rock is not moved by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame. They grow in stillness. Dhammapada, a question to reflect on tonight. Where in your life are you mistaking silence for failure? And how might that silence be the soil of your becoming? A practice of sacred waiting. Hold your hand over your heart. Say softly, I am not. Behind I am becoming. Close your eyes. Picture roots growing deep, not upward, downward, into strength. Breathe. The seed hears you, and in time, it will rise. This was the 23rd turning of our journey. In the next story, we will gaze upon a moon that forgot her name and find what remains when identity dissolves into presence. If this story let your patience breathe again, leave a root in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat, and let's keep trusting the growth beneath stillness. Story 24. When the moon forgot her name. Kenji awoke in darkness, not the kind that frightens, but the kind that softens, that wraps itself around you like an old friend asking nothing. He had fallen asleep beside the lotus field, and now the moon floated above him, high, round, silent. But something was different. She wasn't bright tonight, not golden, not pale. She shimmered dimly, as if unsure of herself. Kenji sat up slowly. He watched the moon for a long time, trying to understand the strange weight in his chest. And then, through the tall grass, an old woman arrived. She carried no lantern. Her robe was colourless, her feet bare. Her face was lined not with age, but with story. She sat beside him, neither spoke. Then, after a long pause, she said, "She's forgotten who she is." Kenji blinked. "The moon." The woman nodded. "Even light can lose its name. There was once a girl named Amaya who had been praised for her brightness since birth. You are so wise, they said, so kind, so gentle, so gifted, so strong, and she wore every word like a thread. She became a tapestry of adjectives, woven by others, admired from afar. But one day, she walked to the pond at the edge of her village, looked into the still water, and saw a face she no longer recognized. She asked, "Who am I if no one is watching?" The wind did not answer. So she left. She wandered from town to town, never staying long enough to collect a title. She wore grey robes. She gave only her first name. She served tea. She swept steps. She listened. And slowly, she unraveled, not into loss, but into truth. Years later, when someone asked, "What do they call you?" she smiled and said, "I don't remember, but the silence has been very kind." Back by the lotus field, the woman looked up. "The moon doesn't shine," she said. "She only reflects." Kenji followed her gaze. Reflects what? The light she can no longer remember. Belongs to her. They sat in silence. The moon's pale face growing fainter. Not dimmer, but softer, as if letting go of performance. Kenji whispered, "Sometimes I don't know who I am anymore." The woman closed her eyes. "Good. That means the real one is coming." He turned toward her. "But if I forget myself, won't I disappear?" She shook her head. "No, you'll return. In our modern world, we are trained to define ourselves by name, by role, by story, by style, by voice, by history. We collect identities like souvenirs, the successful one, the broken one, the healer, the outcast, the teacher, the seeker, and yet there comes a point in spiritual growth when the scaffolding must fall, not as failure, but as liberation. Zen teaches, you are not the moon, you are the space it floats in. You are not your titles, you are the one watching them slip away, and what remains is not absence, it is peace. Kenji lowered his head. He remembered who he had been, the boy eager to please, the student seeking wisdom, the wanderer needing meaning. And now, he didn't feel like any of those things. Only breath, only being, only here. The old woman stood. Before walking away, she said, "Let the moon forget. Let you forget." Kenji asked, "Then what do I become?" She smiled. "Free. If you are, here now, perhaps you've been feeling untethered. You've questioned who you are. Your labels don't fit. Your roles feel hollow. The mirror shows a stranger. Let me offer this. You are not lost. You are loosening. You are shedding skins that no longer fit. You are remembering yourself before the world named you, and in that forgetting, there is space, not to redefine, but to rest, to simply be, without resume, without mask, without needing to shine, just being the sky, silent, vast, complete. A verse from the Buddha, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." Lao Tzu, widely embraced in Zen practice, a reflection for the soft hours. Which parts of your identity feel worn, and what might happen if you let them go? Not in loss, but in trust. A stillness practice. Sit outside under the moonlight or in darkness. Breathe. Say, softly, "I am not what I do. I am not what they said. I am not even the story I tell myself." Breathe again. Rest in the space that remains. That space is you. This was the 24th awakening in our journey. In the next and final story, we will walk the path that walks us home and gather every step into a single breath of return. If this story helped you remember by forgetting, leave a quiet echo in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat, and let's float together into the ending that is also a beginning. Story 25. The path that walked me home. Kenji walked without thinking. No map, no instruction. Just the soft rhythm of his feet on the old path, worn by monks and travelers alike. He did not wonder where he was going. For the first time, he trusted that the path knew more than he did. The world had changed, or maybe it hadn't. Maybe it was he who had become quiet enough to see it clearly. Every tree seemed familiar, yet new. Every breeze a whisper of something he'd once ignored. Even the clouds overhead moved with a language he didn't try to translate. He had seen so much. The bell that rang only once. The moon who forgot her name. The fox at the gate. The mountain that breathed. But now, all those teachings folded inward, like a leaf that curls after blooming, not in sadness, but in readiness. And then, around a bend in the path, he saw it. Not a temple, not a sign, just a small wooden gate, worn, crooked, familiar. He stepped through and realized he had returned to where he started. But something was different. He was home. There was once a monk who wandered for years. He had studied with masters, climbed peaks, sat in silence so deep it pressed against the ribs like ocean weight. But one day, while meditating in a field of wind, a single thought entered his mind. What if the answer was not in arrival, but in return? He stood. He walked back. Every step backward was a soft unraveling of ego, of story, of ambition. He returned to the monastery where he had first received his robe, but when he knocked, the abbot looked at him with no surprise. "Ah," the abbot said, "you finally made it." The monk blinked. "But I've been gone for years." The abbot smiled. "Yes, and now you've arrived." They sat in the same room, same cushions, same walls, same incense. But now, the monk no longer needed anything to be different. And that was the difference. Kenji stood in the garden, the same garden he had swept long ago, before the journey began, before the questions, before the loss, before the seeking. The bamboo still whispered. The wind still carried the same scent of ash and morning. But his hands no longer trembled to be useful. His breath no longer braced itself for meaning. His eyes no longer searched. He sat, and for a long while, he did nothing. No reflection, no mantra, no story. Just sitting, just being. And in that stillness, something beautiful rose. Not like fire, not like thunder, but like warmth returning to a long, cold hand. He was home, not because of place, but because of presence. We spend much of our lives chasing the illusion of becoming. We want to be someone, to achieve, to arrive, to transform. Even our healing becomes performance. But Zen whispers, "You were never broken. You were never gone. You simply forgot how to be here." Every path you walked, every teacher, every silence, every storm was not leading you to a final answer. It was guiding you back to breath, to stillness, to self. The path does not take you home. The path is home. Kenji looked up. The sky stretched endlessly above, no more or less than before. But now, it was enough. He stood. Not because he needed to continue, but because he had finally remembered. There was no separation between traveller and path. The steps he had taken had always been part of his return. He closed his eyes and smiled. If you are here now, at the end of this journey, perhaps something inside you has softened. Perhaps a question has loosened its grip. Perhaps the ache that brought you here has grown quiet. Let me say this, one final time. You are not late. You are not wrong. You are not behind. You are walking yourself home with every breath, every pause, every moment of presence, even when you forget. The path remembers. You do not need to start over. You only need to return to this moment, to this breath, to this open hand. You are already here, and here is enough. A verse to close the circle. When you realize nothing is lacking, the whole world belongs to you. Butsuwa, final reflection. What if the journey was never about becoming something new, but remembering something ancient, quiet, and whole inside you? A final practice. Sit with no intention, no mantra, no agenda. Let your breath rise and fall. Place your hand over your heart. Say softly, I have walked far. I have listened well. I am home. Then bow, not to anything outside, but to the path within you, which never once abandoned you. This was the 25th and final story of our Zen journey. Thank you for walking with me. If this series helped carry you, or if you wish to share your own step, leave a reflection in the comments. Subscribe to The Empty Boat and carry this stillness forward into your day, your breath, your life. And remember, you are the boat, you are the water, you are the return. Dear listener, if you've made it here, through the quiet, through the stories, through the stillness, thank you. You didn't just listen. You stayed, you breathed, you returned. That is no small thing in a world that pulls us in every direction but inward. We created the empty boat to be more than just a channel. We wanted to offer a place, a still lake, a quiet lantern, a whispered truth, where you could pause, soften, and remember who you were before the noise. If these stories brought something back to life in you, a calm breath, a tender insight, a small inner smile, we invite you to leave a reflection in the comments below. Tell us which story stayed with you. Share how the silence shifted something in your day. Let us know what you'd like to hear next. Your words help others feel less alone, and they help us continue this gentle path forward, together. If you feel the value of these teachings, please share this with someone who may need it, and, most of all, subscribe to The Empty Boat. There will be more journeys, more stillness, more ways to return. Until then, stay close to your breath, stay soft to your own becoming, and remember, you were never far from home. From all of us at The Empty Boat, thank you. We'll see you again when the wind is quiet and the bell rings. Good night.